I've got 7:01 on my computer for time, so we'll go ahead and start
Okay.
the Wednesday, March 17th, 2021 Wetlands Commission meeting. Do you want to do the roll call just to have it on the record?
Sure. Yep. Why don't we? Dave Fox,
Here.
Bob Hannon,
I'm here.
Robert Eisner,
Here.
Mark Simpson,
Here.
Ned Stachin,
Here.
Jay Tulin,
Here.
Rich Berlandi,
Here.
and Emily Breck.
Here.
Okay, we're good to go.
Okay, first item on the agenda is Harvest Power LLC for installation of a ground-mounted solar array at 303 Middle Road.
Yes, and I believe we've got Tom Casey on the phone this evening. Tom, are you there?
I saw his name earlier.
I did too.
This is Carlo Lanza. I'm on as well. Yes, he's on. I'm imagining he's having some type of technical difficulty here. I see his mute going on and off.
Hello, can you hear me?
There you go. We can hear you, Tom, now.
Fixed it by mashing the mute button a few times.
Okay. So if you want to go ahead and discuss with the commission the additional information that came in last night, and we'll go from there.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yes, we appreciate the comments. This written response is to the comments that I got. I think it was actually just before the meeting last couple of weeks. And as well, we added some more information as well based on some of the verbal comments that we received, you know, on the Zoom meeting last 2 weeks. But yeah, just to begin, you know, the first three comments were really to identify the location of the wetlands and the solar system in relation to it and the property lines. Again, this is just to clarify what I said last time. You know, I think you said locate and identify wetlands and include a report letter from the soil scientist. You know, in no way are we challenging, you know, the town of Farmington's, you know, record of where the wetlands are and where our solar is. As you can see, it sits not quite squarely in it, but substantially in it. And as a result, you know, our application is about whether that has an effect on those wetlands as it is there. And like I said, in no way are we arguing that we're not in any wetlands. So that's really that point right there. And of course, we're a minimum of 75 feet from the nearest neighbor, number 83 there, that lot off of Woodruff Road. Do you just want me to go through and then we'll take comments after, or is that?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and do that? That's probably the cleanest way to do this.
So regarding, you know, rainfall and drainage, we had the comment recommend increasing the separation distance between the solar panels to be equal to or greater than the solar panel width. Upon review after the meeting, we were able to increase the interrow spacing to 14 feet. So that will then be actually a little bit bigger than the panels as they stand. You know, as they're put together, they're 13'2", but as they're tilted slightly, that kind of horizontal distance is slightly smaller than that. But yeah, as they stand now, by, you know, increasing, I think just putting a foot or two extra in the interrow spacing will increase that gap to be much larger than two panels put together. So the 14 foot will be the distance from one panel, the back of one panel to the front of the next. And that'll be area that can just, you know, the ground, you know, the rain can fall onto the ground as it is, as it stands and as it was, you know, beforehand. Moving on to an increased proposed, include proposed vegetation around and between panels and maintenance procedures. So in between those panel arrays, as well as, you know, underneath it where we can, we're going to just preserve the grassy wetlands. What we have right there is a field. It's been mowed. We propose the planting of a wetland seed mix to return the field close to the state it's in now. The grassland we maintained as before, with regular mowing to be kept at a length that does not interfere with the PV array. Again, this is just to return as much as that open space, that wetland space, to the state it is in right now, which is a mown field. A comment that came up from one of the commission last meeting, which we thought was a good idea and which we'd be happy to implement. is at the drip edge of the array. So at the front of each array, which would be the south edge, where any rainfall that falls on that plane of panels will drip off, we can install a mulch pad. I put that in a kind of separate attachment just so you can see it, but just roughly, I mean, it will be about probably about 4 feet of mulch running the length of those arrays right there just at the drip pad. And we agree with, I think, the Wetlands Commission. I'm sorry, I'm not sure which member it was who commented it, that would mitigate some of the erosion from the water falling on off those solar panels onto the ground there. Okay. Again, moving on, drainage concerns as project area flows to the adjacent property with historical drainage problems, and the angle of solar panels contradicts typical existing sheet flow drainage. Again, that's, I added just as a bit of extra evidence, the topo map, which I got from your, GIS website. The area there is not too steep. Obviously, there is a drainage pattern. I think it was said before, it goes to the east and the north. Again, our solar panels, the way that the only way they can work in this situation, any situation, is to be angled south. So that angle of the solar panels is not something we can really work with to any extent. But again, just I think it ties back into the original points by increasing that gap between them, by including a mulch pad, and by returning the area that is not covered by solar, and even underneath as it drains to the state it's in right now, will really mitigate any effect of that sort of slight disruption in flow pattern. Obviously, the pattern where the rain falls on the solar array, it will drip and drain to the south off that solar array, but then it would just resume any kind of drainage that it was, going to do anyway if there wasn't a solar system on this site. Again, moving on, number 8, depict the construction staging area. So again, we're just using the site as it is. There's an asphalt driveway coming into the site where it's going to end right there by some maintenance sheds, some outhouse buildings, and there's an existing yard, kind of, just an open space right there. Again, it's asphalt or hard pack, and that's where we'll stage. That's where we'll set our equipment before it's going to be moved onto the array and installed. And there will be, actually, we can go on to number 9 now, depict the location and types of ENS, and really number 10. I had this as a separate attachment, Shannon.
Yeah, I do have them down, so I can page down to the. Is this?
This is really just this and the page, just the one page above it as well. It's a simple and effective, I think, erosion control plan that we're going to do here during installation. And as you can see there, again, we got the array located within the wetlands as it stands. During construction, we will be bringing materials in from Middle Road. That means it's the longer access from the west over there. But that will avoid any kind of, disruption with the residential Woodruff Road right there. It's not a lot of material to bring in, but there will be a few semis, a few flatbeds to bring it in, and we want to avoid, disrupting the homeowners right there. As we get close to the site will be encircled by a silt fence, as shown by that black line around it, just to avoid any kind of erosion or any kind of sediment loss from outside of that construction area. As the trucks enter, they will go over a track pad just to, to remove any dirt or any material as it's leaving or coming in. That will also encompass the staging area that I had there. It's shown in that area between the 2 buildings in the southeast. And as an additional protection measure, where we're doing the trenching and boring in the northwest corner back to the site, we were going to install just a little bit of diamond sock, like a silt sock over there, just as an additional erosion control measure. Like I said, I think it's a pretty simple but effective measure to keep the site as self-contained and limit any effect we have as much as possible. Okay. When we look at that, I think we had a couple more points. Depict the location of the proposed trenching. So that was shown in there. That's from that northwest corner of the array, which is where our AC conduits will leave the solar system, the solar array, and they will head over to the west, the eastern edge of the existing building, which is where their service is. So that's it right there. And that's actually a wooded area in between. Okay.
And I think the final item was about security fencing.
Yeah, we went back, we just confirmed this, once we leave, at a perimeter distance of around about 15 feet from the edge of the array, there will be a 6-foot high, probably a chain link security fence installed when we're done, just to keep, just keep people away from the array, and just as an additional protection measure for the system right there.
Okay.
So, having said that, I think that was, addresses those points there. If anybody has any questions, we'll be happy to answer them.
Going back to the original sort of protocol we've been doing. Rich, I'll start with you. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, I have one question. I understand you're using directional drilling to install the conduit from the array to the building. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. We're going to do the directional boring starting in the northwest corner, back to the building. Just to be, that's the goal, is to go all the way back there. Of course, as we get into that wooded area, there may be some areas where, there may be some rocks and stuff that we may have to do some trenching. But the goal and the aim is to do as much as we can with the directional boring machine.
Okay. Usually when you do directional boring, there's a bentonite slurry that's used. Will you be drilling from the wetland area up to the building or the other direction?
You want me to jump in here, Tom?
Yeah, could you call that? Be a good one.
Yeah, more than likely we would be drilling from the wetland area uphill from that area. But it really, in reality, let's start with probably the northwest corner, and about 50% of the array is open field and grass in that side, and then there's a wooded area. So we can really, as far as setting up, we can go either way. We're also, by the way, open to whatever recommendations there are as far as whether we trench or directionally bore or both. We're really not opposed to whatever means and methods. So if there's some concern about the bentonite, we can definitely trench in lieu of doing that. We're not opposed to that.
Yeah, I'm personally, I'm not opposed to the directional drilling. Obviously, that's going to have less impact on the woodland between. It's just dealing with the bentonite at the end there that can get pretty messy. So I'd like to see some, what measures you're going to be taking to control that bentonite slurry.
Okay, sounds good.
That's all I have.
Okay, thanks, Rich. Emily?
I have nothing at this time. Thank you.
Dave?
I'd like to thank you for putting the mulch in at the drip edge. And also, I was just wondering on the number 6, the drainage concerns from the neighborhood. I guess that was put in by the staff. I was wondering if we knew where that was, and what the possibility of exacerbating this situation would be. I did look back at the stormwater plan that we had gotten from our previous solar array, and in their calculations, they actually had a slight increase in runoff from the site. So I don't think it's a slam dunk that nothing is going to happen. But I was just wondering if we knew where that drainage problem was.
Dave, I'll answer this. This is Shannon Rutherford. So it was a staff comment. In general, in this area, as this wetland body, there's a divide here. There is a portion that flows to the south, and then there's somewhere in this vicinity, it starts to flow north and then crosses under Woodruff Road and Wood Pond Road and heads to Wood Pond Lake. And it's just because it is very flat here, it's we get ponding and some drainage complaints from some of the neighbors here, but it doesn't look like the solar panel is going to add to or diminish that condition. It sounds like it's going to be a net neutral. So, you know, Bruce and I will look at it when there's a pre-construction meeting, and if you know, there's a few, if there's maintenance things that needs to be done, then we'll alert the individuals, you know, whether property management or that can be handled as part of this project.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
That's all I have.
Okay, Robert,
I have no questions.
Mark,
No questions.
Ned?
Yeah, I want to confirm, is there going to be any grading that's going to be done in the area of the array? Or is it basically sticking to the existing grade?
Be sticking to the existing grade in the area.
Okay. And there is going to be oh yeah, I see it here, a tracking pad for the trucks. Okay. Yeah, that's all I had. Thank you.
Okay, Jay?
I don't have any questions.
I do. Can you elaborate a little bit more on this mulch pad that you're talking about at the drip edge? And the reason I'm asking is because mulch tends to deteriorate rather rapidly. So that to me indicates that it's more of a high maintenance scenario. I don't know if you have looked at anything like crushed stone or something along those lines as a way of dealing with it. And then in combination with that, would what you're proposing to do act in any way as a way to possibly sort of hold some of the water back and keep it in sort of a sheet flow form with this mulch pad that you're talking about doing for the drip edge?
Tom, would you like me to jump in or?
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Yes, so as far as the comment, I'll start with the second part of the question. I do not think we're going to propose anything that would disrupt the sheet flow of the water here. So we're not talking about any type of berm or anything that would disrupt the natural flow patterns here. You know, it was more our understanding that we would do some mulch, you know, initially really until like the vegetation, you know, it's our thought that, you know, once the project is completed and the vegetation is restored, that the necessity for the mulch pad would be, not needed. So we were kind of going to restore it back ultimately to its natural state there. So, that was the general intention, is to kind of, do this until, full vegetation could be restored. But, it could be done on a longer term basis. We would have to get your input on what you would like to see there. I don't think
I was
we're
asking because based on the way that it was described, to me, it indicated that this was going to be sort of a permanent drip edge under the panels. And what I'm hearing now
right.
is that's not
I
the case. And this is more a temporary measure until the site is stabilized with vegetation.
That was my understanding, yes, that we're going to do this as a temporary measure for stabilization.
Okay. And the current drainage pattern in this area, what is the current drainage pattern?
We could
hang
go
on.
to the
Yep, I just gotta. So this is the access road coming down from the top. These are the buildings where the construction yard's going to be. here's lot 83, so the solar field is right in and around here. It's very flat. We've got, here's contour 235. Contour 230 is over here. I got another 230. This is still the 235 here. Both of these are 230. Bruce has been out at the property a number of times. Bruce here, our development specialist. And the driveway almost creates a high point. You can see there's a little bit of a channel here with some of the contours. Some of the, this drainage flows in this direction, and then it meanders at the back of these properties and then ultimately picks up a drainage swale that runs, you're seeing just the start of it here, that runs north along the back of the properties on Woodruff Road, some of which we have been in on site walks. And then it crosses under Woodruff, under Wood Pond, and then into the lake. So somewhere in here is a drainage divide.
Okay, so basically looks like you're staying pretty much at the 230 elevation for almost the entire area.
Correct, yeah, for this solar.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Another comment, it's a suggestion. Based on what I have seen from other solar projects around the state, one of the things that you may consider doing with your fencing is going 7 feet high. And the reason is not so much for people, but for deer. And I would also recommend that you mount the fence 6 inches above the ground so that it doesn't act as a, I mean, granted, this is not that large of an area, so it may not be as critical, but typically we'll see like a 6-inch gap underneath the fence between the bottom of the fence and the ground so that it allows critters to continue to have access. So that may be something that you want to consider installing. But I think the 7-foot high fence is probably better, especially my guess is you've got deer in this area, and I'm not sure that a 6-foot fence will keep them out. They get over the fence, you've got problems. So it just may be, something you want to take a look at. May save you a lot of issues going down the line. That was basically all that I had.
Okay, thank you for the comment, and we'll take that under advisement. Thank you.
So on this, we have accepted the application. I mean, I'll listen to what folks have to say as to whether or not they think this is or is not a significant activity. I'll start with you, Rich.
I would lean toward it not being significant.
Okay. Emily?
I would vote for not significant.
Okay. Dave?
As would I.
And Robert?
Not significant.
Mark?
Not significant.
Ned?
Because it's mostly in a grass field that's already existing and there's no clearing for the panels, I think this is not significant.
Jay?
I agree. Same here. Thank you.
Yeah, and I agree with folks as well. I mean, and again, one of the primary differences here versus a lot of the solar projects I've seen is this is for personal consumption on the property rather than, using this site as a major solar farm to generate power and put it out on the grid. So I think, again, because it's for on-site use, I think that also helps. I guess the question I have next is, how do people feel about the application, seeing as how, some of the information we just got may have come in yesterday. We're just hearing about it now. What's your take? Are you comfortable with the project to go forward and rendering a decision, whether it's up or down? So I'll go the back end. So we'll go with Jay.
I think it's okay the way it is.
Ned.
I'm ready to move forward on it.
Okay. Mark.
I'm ready to move forward also.
Robert.
Yeah, I think move forward.
Dave.
Ready to vote.
Okay, now Shannon, if I'm correct on this, neither Rich nor Emily can vote, correct? Because they're alternates. We have 6 regular members present and there's 1 vacancy on the commission, and I cannot fill somebody to vote in that vacancy spot, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So would somebody care to make a motion with any conditions that they may deem appropriate? Oh, come on.
This is Ned. I'll make a motion to approve the application with the recommendations about and what they are talking about for to assist the drainage in a temporary basis, and in working with the recommendations from the town staff.
Is there a second?
Jay, I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? Dave?
Nope.
Robert?
Nope.
Mark?
None.
Ned?
No.
Jay?
Nope.
The one thing that might want to include on it, if they opt to go for the drilling, the horizontal drilling, I think the one thing I might like to see is that there's a plan that is worked out in terms of how they will deal with the drilling as well as the spoils from the drilling. But that's something that I think the town staff can review and make sure that it's of their approval. Because again, I agree with what Rich said. This can be pretty messy, and you're dealing with some chemicals that you don't necessarily want left behind. So I would just like to make sure that if they do decide to do the horizontal drilling, that that's something that is worked out with the town staff so they know what the plan is and how it'll be addressed.
This is Ned. I'll amend it to say that regardless of either the horizontal drilling or the trenching, that they provide a plan to the town staff for their approval before proceeding.
And Jay, you're willing to amend your second?
I was just going to say, are we amend? Yes. Yes. I was
Okay.
going to ask if I needed to amend my second. Yes. I'm
Okay.
good with that.
All right, and seeing as how I didn't hear any other comments earlier, we'll just go for a vote. So those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstaining? Good luck with the project.
Thank you so much.
Next on the agenda, Miss Porter School, 44 Main Street. Talking about the connection of Sarah Lane, and I couldn't tell you where that was to start with.
It's an internal roadway. I believe we've got Katie Bradley on the phone with us this evening.
If I may interrupt for a moment, I need to recuse myself or whatever from this one as an employee of Ms. Porter's, so I will be stepping back.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you. So,
Hello, would you like me to start, Shannon?
yes, Katie, why don't you go ahead, introduce yourself as you normally would for a meeting, and then I've got, I think, all or most of your attachments. I can scroll to, I don't know, if you want the landscape plan, we can go to that and use that for a basis for conversation.
Okay, excellent. Good evening, everyone. My name's Katie Bradley. I'm here tonight representing Miss Porter's school. Just briefly, over the past 20 years, we've engaged in 4 separate master plans, and on every one of those master plans, Sarah Lane, which is the road, an internal road that runs from Main Street to Garden Street through the center of our campus, has been identified as something that we should address, and mostly because of safety. It's a major thoroughfare for our students throughout the day, passing back and forth, but it also is the means of a lot of our deliveries on campus. And it never seems to make it to the top because there's always something more glamorous and shiny to spend our capital money on. And we built fields and a library and a pool. And fortunately, 3 years ago, our Board of Trustees decided to renovate 60 Main. We needed to update our 1950s kitchen. And in order to do all of that work, we have spent over the last year and a half digging up Sarah Lane to update our antiquated utility systems. And so now, because it is such an eyesore and we still have the safety issue, we have permission to go ahead and to finally take care of and act to beautify and renovate and enhance this lane that runs through our campus. And we're here tonight to, ask for your approval to improve the safety, increase the parking, improve the drainage, and then basically overall beautify this campus entrance off of Garden Street that has always felt like a back door. I have Tristan Wallace here tonight with me, a project manager with Lorero Engineering Associates in Plainville. And he and John Stewart have worked with us to create this beautiful design. And I'd like to turn over to Tristan and give him the opportunity to explain the key components and answer any questions that you have regarding the design and engineering of this project.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yep. Hi, my name is Tristan Wallace, and I'm with Lorero Engineering out of the Plainville office. As Katie said, I've worked with her for the past few months in the design and layout of the parking area in Sarah Lane, as well as the drainage design. If you don't mind, we can start with the existing conditions. It's
Sure, I'm
probably
happy
the
to do
second
that.
sheet. Yeah.
Right here?
Yep, that works. So I just wanted to identify this sheet, so it shows the current conditions of the site. There's an existing parking lot, and the hatched area is an easement, which is a throughway going up to Sarah Lane. To the north are 3 tennis courts as well, 2 of those which we'll be removing. We'll see that in the site plan. And then to the south, there's a wetlands pond area that was that the survey was done by Hodge, and the wetlands was flagged by JMM Wetlands Consulting Services. That was in July 2020. So the wetlands pond is, from what I can surmise, is a wetlands retention area. So it was designed originally for stormwater drainage. So you can see there are 2 pipes that come down into the, yeah, exactly right there, come down into the wetlands. And then if you look at the southwest corner of the parking area, there's a kind of a curb cutout. If you go south a little bit, in the corner of the hatched area that kind of protrudes towards the wetland, there's a cut out there that some surface flow comes down into the wetland as well. So it brings in some of the drainage from that portion of the site as currently stated. So we can go to the site plan. Should be the next one, yeah. As Katie mentioned, we're doing a full kind of redevelopment and reconstruction of the parking lot area in Sarah Lane. To the north, the 2 tennis courts will be taken out to accommodate additional parking. And then towards where Sarah Lane and Garden Street kind of meet, there's going to be installed a roundabout that will facilitate a drop-off area for evening and morning drop-offs. And then south of that, we're proposing about 9 additional spots just to increase the amount of parking. I believe Ms. Porter's could never have enough parking. So that area will help accommodate some of that additional parking that's necessary to facilitate the property and the use. We are also improving the Sarah Lane kind of access way as well with pavers. The width and the configuration will stay pretty much the same. However, it'd be resurfaced. I believe currently it's kind of a mixture of bituminous concrete a walkway. So we'll resurface it with pavers just to add another level of aesthetics. And well, as we can get to in the later stages in the drainage plan, I'll show that we're also improving the drainage in that area. So we can focus on the upland review area for the drainage, yeah, in the grading plan. Yep. So the upland, we have the upland review area shown with that with that buffer line right there. So the roundabout area and the additional parking kind of encompass most of that that upland review area, as well as some ancillary grading to accommodate the parking. We are providing an overall improvement on the drainage as well for pretty much the project area. The amount of the area is about 1.323 acres, and most of that we are capturing in the new drainage system. So as you can see, we have new catch basins and new conveyance ways as shown, a detention system, which will also have an isolator row. And at the last catch basin, right before the discharge into the wetland, we're also providing a hydrodynamic separator to basically treat the runoff from Sarah Lane and any runoff in the parking area that's not captured by the detention system. Overall, we're reducing the flow to the wetlands pond in all storms. That's 2-year storm up to the 100-year storm. So there's a reduction in peak flow and then an improvement on the water quality as well. We can go to the soil erosion and sediment control plan.
Is that
one more?
Utility or landscaping. There we go.
Yeah, there we go. Yep. So I just wanted to show this to show how we're handling some of the construction considerations for the site. Every catch basin, yep, we do have an entrance pad there. So any trucks going through for construction will come through Garden Street. We do have inlet protection on any of the new or existing catch basins as a way to protect any sediment from getting into the wetlands during construction. And if you see to the southeast, right before the wetland, we are proposing a silt fence. That's that dotted line there. So it's placed down gradient. So any stormwater flow or any debris will be caught by the silt fence there. That's pretty much all, most of what I wanted to highlight about the design. I would say overall there's an overall improvement to the site and an improvement to the drainage, which greatly impacts the wetlands from a water quality standpoint and a reduction in peak flow. I don't know if Katie, you want to say anything more, or we can take questions at this point.
Yeah, questions. Unless you want me to say more, Shannon,
No, that's fine.
I can talk for hours, but I'm pretty sure you want to get answers from Tristan.
Yeah. No, that's fine. We can go to questions. I think, where'd my chair go?
I'm here, I think.
There we go.
Rich, any comments, questions?
The only question I have, I'm a little unclear is where the outlet from that wetland area is and where it goes. Right. So the wetland outlets to the southeast, it's not shown on this plan, but it goes underneath Garden Street, where I believe it continues on. Either it ties into the drainage in Garden Street or it continues on underneath. I'm not fully sure, but for the basis of our design, we felt as if since we weren't increasing the peak flow to the wetland, the outlet would be able to handle any flow that we were presenting. Okay. No other questions.
Okay, Emily?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Okay, Dave?
I don't have any questions either. It's less flow and more treatment, so it looks good.
Mark?
Yeah, as I see the improvement that's being put in, I think it's going to do more to protect the wetlands. Just construction is going to be, you know, nearby, but I think they're going to take controls to make sure nothing affects the wetlands. So I'm fine with this.
And Ned?
I just had a question on the subsurface detention system.
Yep.
So if we get a big storm and that starts to fill up, where does the excess water go after that?
So there's catch basins north and south of that. The system itself is designed for the 100-year storm, so it
Okay.
doesn't peak. It doesn't peak out at the 100-year storm. If we get a storm larger than that, there'll be puddles in the parking lot, but that's with any parking lot, I would say. However, like I said, we don't have any surface flow that exactly goes directly to the wetland. That was eliminated. So everything inside the parking area is curbed off. So we have 6-inch curbs on every side. So most of the storm water, if for whatever reason the system gets surcharged, everything will stay inside the parking lot and puddle.
So those, was it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? The 9 spots just south of the on the south end of
Yep.
the cul-de-sac, those won't drain down to the wetland?
No, yeah, where she's circling now. That the grading is so that it goes along the curb and then it goes into that catch basin first and then goes into the wetland.
Okay, so it's going to be draining, all that area is going to be draining towards the center of the cul-de-sac or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah,
Roundabout.
right. Yeah, exactly. Like pretty much how you see how we created a, for lack of a better term, a swale. So it will go, it's almost like a gutter flow in a roadway.
Okay.
It'll go along the gutter and into the catch basin.
And this is, the intention here is, you know, obviously there's a lot of improvements and it looks good. And then you're gonna have just delivery trucks would be using that Sarah Lane section now, or the delivery truck's gonna stop in the roundabout?
Okay, yeah. So if you look at the roundabout a bit closer, there are lines that are shown around the roundabout. So what we've done is we create, and there's actually a detail on the detail sheet. There's a sloped granite curb that that goes up the roundabout. So Sarah Lane is mainly pedestrian.
Okay.
As for it, but in the morning, I believe, Katie, you can speak more to this, but in the morning there may be a delivery to the service area in the back, or or something like that. So we've actually confirmed that trucks can get around that roundabout. There is a gate that will be installed in the front where they'll go stop and get access into Sarah Lane.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Well, I thought you wanted meant to come in the other room.
I think that's all I guess, you know, I appreciate the fact that all the water's going and it'll be cleaner, the water going to the up to the wetland. I'm a little concerned that the wetland's gonna go through some dry stages with that. I mean, I don't know the history of how much water that usually holds.
We're not yeah, I'm sorry.
No, so I'm just wondering if it might be reduced too much, or
no, it's not significantly reduced. The minimum reduction is about 0.32 CFS. The maximum reduction is a little over 1 CFS.
Okay.
And that's, in my analysis, is only up from the area we're touching. There's more drainage that goes to this site. The site's very old, so some of the drainage pipes, the 2 pipes take in drainage from farther up and outside of our scope. Not too much, of course, but farther out of our scope. So the drainage you see here is only designed to handle the increase in impervious that we're creating, and then add some treatment to the water that we're intercepting in our proposed design.
okay. And so there's sheet flow going across, like behind these buildings that are adjacent to Sarah Lane.
Yeah, exactly.
Everything there is still going to
Yep.
that. Okay.
Yep.
All right. That's all I have. Thank you.
Jay?
I don't have any questions, but I'm not sure where exactly I should share this, but I want to disclose something that I don't think creates any problem, but I want to do that anyway in the spirit of full disclosure. I saw Godfrey Hodge, I'm assuming that's the surveyor that's involved in this project. I know Adam. I know Adam Hoffman very well, who I think is the owner of that business. I don't think it's a problem, but he's married to the sister of my first wife, Nancy. I don't think that creates any conflict, but I just wanted to disclose that I consider him my brother-in-law. I've known him for 35 years, and just wanted to come forward with that. Otherwise, I have no questions.
He's not paying you off the books, is he?
Well, and that's why I say it's not a problem. But again, I just wanted to disclose that I know Adam very well, and
Okay.
you know.
I don't know, Jay. I think you have to resign.
I have a couple of minor comments. One is, if you would be so kind as to replace the silt fence that you proposed with silt sock, that would be appreciated. Again, it's just that's a personal issue that I have when you're getting close to wetland areas. And also, is there any type of maintenance plan that would be required or should be provided for the subsurface system?
Yep, absolutely. And actually, that was a point on my notes, and I apologize for not mentioning that. On the plan and in the drainage report, there's a section that does speak to the maintenance of the stormwater management systems. So we go through the catch basins, manholes, the subsurface, the detention system, any lawn areas that may convey surface flow, and the hydrodynamic separator. So there's quarterly checks, biannual checks, and then requirements for cleaning out if debris seen. So that maintenance schedule will be given to the facilities person, and then any other employees that are involved in the maintenance will need to have that. We have an inspection log that they can utilize at kind of an example. So goes through the checkpoints on what to check and what to be concerned with.
Okay, and I'll ask this of Shannon, because would we want to see sort of an annual report?
Correct. Yes, January 31st of each year, an
Okay.
annual report of the maintenance items that have taken place.
All right, and then I do have one other question, which is totally unrelated to the wetlands. But the location of the handicap spaces, is that ADA compliant?
So the site itself, if you see Sarah Lane, the slope is relatively steep in that area. So Sarah Lane itself doesn't lend itself to compliance if you're coming from the parking area up Sarah Lane. There is a door to the rear of up that building there, and the handicap, the placement of the ADA spots is more for future kind of representation of where those should go. The grade there is less than 2%, so it allows itself for passage and into the building that's right there. So that area would be ADA compliant. So that's where we're proposing, if we needed spaces, those will go.
Okay, yeah, I couldn't tell that there was a building there.
Yeah, this entire area right there is building.
And if you look at where the spaces are in relationship to some of the other buildings, that's why I was asking. But if you've got a building there, that makes sense as well. Okay.
Yep.
All right, thank you. I have no other questions at this time.
Hey, Bob.
Robert.
Yep. I do have a question. Tristan, the wetland, is that a functioning wetland or is it existing grassland? I can't visualize where that is.
Oh, it is a functioning wetland. It does have wetlands vegetation. There's a report as well that we have as an attachment, but it has vegetation. I believe it meets the soil conditions. It's not lawned area. It doesn't get landscaped or anything.
Okay, because I had the same question that Commissioner Stachin asked about the decreased flow, but I think you've already touched on that. So it's a good thing you're improving the water quality, and it sounds like the decrease in flow is not going to be significant. Thanks.
No.
Is that it, Robert?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So any other questions, comments?
This is Rich. I had one question that came up. Is there a spill prevention plan in place in case a car in the parking lot springs a leak in a tank or something? to address it getting into the storm drainage and potentially the wetland?
Right. Well, the hydrodynamic separator, the part of the reasoning for having that at the last point is to help with any treatment of any pollutants or sediment that may come from the parking lot prior to entering the wetland. We don't have a documented spill prevention plan. That's something we can put together. We do it for gas stations and things like that. So there are documents that we can provide, but the intent of the hydrodynamic separator is to, in its placement, is to catch anything that may convey through the drainage or in the parking lot itself prior to entering the wetland.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, so now we cannot act on it, but the first thing we need to do is, can I get a motion to accept the application, because it's obviously work within the 150-foot regulated area, so it is a regulated activity.
This is Mark. I so moved.
Is there a second?
Dave will second.
Any discussion, comments? Hearing none, those in favor of accepting the application say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Abstaining? Okay, does anybody feel as though there's a need for a site walk? I mean, I don't see it, but I mean, it's all pretty much internal, and the area is already disturbed in one way or another, whether it's existing tennis courts or parking lot, things of that nature. So anybody else have a desire to go out there and check the site?
I'm too old to go back to school.
You're never too old to go back to school.
There you go.
All right. so
Mr.
I'm
Chairman,
gonna-
I don't feel a need to go. I think there's enough separation between the construction areas. So as long as the soil and erosion control plan is there and there's enough oversight from staff, there should be minimal impact to the wetland. No need to do a
I
sidewalk.
agree with you. Okay, so Shannon, I don't think we need the site walk.
Okay.
And anybody want to make a comment about significance?
This is Robert.
I don't think it's significant.
Robert?
Insignificant.
Dave?
Yeah, I would agree. Not significant.
Emily?
I'm only recused
I'm
as
gonna
well.
not vote.
Rich?
I don't think it's significant either.
And we'll let you have some say, Jay.
I don't think it's significant.
Ned?
Despite the fact that I know Adam Hoffman very well, I don't think it's significant.
Ned?
I think it's mostly just a reconfiguring of, paved areas that are already there. So I don't think it's significant.
I agree with everybody. I don't think there's any significance here either. So I think from that perspective, well, we're pretty much done with this until the next meeting,
Correct.
because
you
we
can't
cannot
vote
act
tonight.
on it tonight, so. Okay,
Okay. All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you
Appreciate it.
both
Thank
for
you.
calling in.
next item on the agenda, 130 Birdseye Road, a regulated activity to upgrade a parking lot design and related site improvements.
Yes. And I believe we have Biff Scheckinger on the phone.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Biff Scheckinger, landscape architect, licensed in Connecticut. This is the proposal for renovating the old Connecticut School of Broadcasting into a medical office facility. With me is George Logan. I'll let him, this is the final plan, we'll get back to that, but I'll let George Logan go through the wetlands analysis and everything. But the basic, I'll give you the highlights right now. We're not impacting any wetlands directly. There's no water quality renovation strategies installed in this currently, which we are going to install. We've worked pretty much within the development envelope, except for creating these two water renovation basins. We've reduced impervious coverage on site And we've also reduced it significantly, 1,600 square feet plus within the upland review area. So with that, I'll let George take over and go through the wetlands. Hi, George. And then we'll just wrap up and we'll answer questions.
Good evening, everyone. This is George Logan, REMA Ecological Services. So the first order of business for me on this site was to delineate the wetlands. You see here figure A, that was part of the on-site soil investigation and wetland delineation report that's in the record. It shows you in the green lines what I've done. I started over Birdside Road on the south side. You see the first segment, and then there's a kind of an upland peninsula, so I kind of stopped and then picked up on the other side. When you get to flag 1A12, what you'll realize there that there is a little sump. It's a man-made pool, and there's a culvert, and you'll see that in a moment when I show you a few pictures. And that is to allow for access to the broadcasting facility that's in the back. Then on the other side of the access roadway, there's again the culvert, and there's actually a man-made ditch, watercourse, I guess, that drains the wetlands to on the south side and into a large wetland system. And then, of course, I went all the way around, as you can see, back to Birdside Road. Shannon, if you can show me the soil survey map. Okay, so what I've done here, again, subject site is where the arrow shows. And what I've done here is I've put a little circle around a few of the soil types to give you an idea of the extensive wetland that is associated. Basically, the site is surrounded by wetlands. Obviously, you have an upland island in the middle, and they're 42C. But there's a significant amount of wetland that surrounds it. Probably not where all the houses are within the wetland, but you can kind of see. This hillside wetland has been more or less maintained. It's not, mature forested land. On occasion, it has been trimmed to allow for renovation of the antennas there. Then what I'd like to do next is to show you, starting with photo A, some pictures to kind of give you an idea. So this is the wetland on the south part of the existing development envelope. Again, a forested wetland, seasonally flooded. Let's go to the next one. This gives you an idea of the upland island and you see some houses in the back. And then the next photo. Here I have a wetland flag. The upland island is behind me, and this is the narrow connection of the wetland, and you can see the parking lot in the back. Okay, go to the next one, Shannon. Remember I told you about this little sump that has been excavated, and you can see there in the forefront with a little snow on top of it, the pipe that allows for drainage to drain the southern swamp, if you will, to that ditch that you will go to the other side now. And this is kind of what it looks like. So it's not forested, it's scrub shrub. It has some pockets of wet meadow, a little bit of marsh with cattails here and there. So it's pretty dense. I had a lot of fun going through there. Let's go to the next one. Again, this gives you an idea of what I just mentioned, a little pockets of wet meadow, and all that red is obviously silky dogwood. And then you can see some trees here and there. All right, next one, please. I'm looking sort of up towards where the antennas are, and you can see that it's not very mature, as these are red maples. Let's go to the next one. This is along, again, the western side, the western wetland boundary that I delineated, and I'm looking back towards the building. That's, I think, the northern portion of the building. You can see
Yes, the annex building.
That's right, yeah. And you can see the wetland boundary flag there and how dense it is. Okay, let's go to the next one. And this is just one shot. I didn't give you a lot of shots of the northern forested wetland, which is it looks a little bit like the southern forested wetland. It's mostly undisturbed, and it's again seasonally flooded. and it contains both poorly drained and very poorly drained soils, as all the wetlands that you've seen so far. And then I have a couple more pictures. The first one will show you the general location of where one of the water quality basins is going to be located, and that kind of the center a little bit towards the building. And the next picture will show you, you can see that car that's my car, I guess, the little station wagon to the north, to the right of it is the other water quality basin. And that will take out a couple of trees and a whole bunch of shrubs. Most of them are multiflora rose and some blackberries. And we'll explain how that, Biff will explain how that is working in a moment. So that gives you a general description of the wetland resources that were delineated that surround this site and the existing conditions. And I think I'll let Biff give you a little bit on the proposed conditions now.
Shannon, can we go to the S&E control plan, the colored one? Oh, we go back to the aerial for a second. Please, thank you. As you can see in this, I don't know, can you see my pointer? Oh, great. The wetland line is inside the forested line, and we're not cutting it. None of the grading touches any of the trees in the forested line. As I say, we're not in the wetlands. So we'll go to the S&E control plan, please. Thank you. Basically, you see that the highlight in the center front, that's the non-regulated area. We kept mostly within the development envelope, except for Basin 2, which is in the very back of the site, and Basin 1, which is in the open yard area, which was obviously disturbed area when they originally developed it. You can see the wetlands going around, and then that stream quarter further into the wetlands. It's a very, as you know, it's sunk down. It's 8 or 9 feet below the road grade in the front, and continue. And it's basically it's very wet conditions, high groundwater, and almost no real topographic relief. So we had to work within the confines of the development. We did decrease, and for the whole site, decreased coverage in impervious. We decreased in the upland review area over 1,645 square feet of coverage within the upland review area. We were fortunate, we were able to get a ZBA variance for the parking in the front yard. We got that on Monday night. And so basically, because of the little grade change we get from the road, we were able to get storm drainage in front, where the watershed goes from the whole front yard, and the front parking go into this new basin, which is a wet bottom. It's 130, it was required 1,332 square cubic feet, and we're at 1,365 cubic feet. And it's going to be a wet bottom with a mix of wetland vegetation, wet seed mixes. Picking up, we're going to have a new catch basin where they had only one catch basin, a pipe that wandered directly over here. We were able to get to the discharge here, but we'll have a new basin with a 4-foot sump and a hood on it. We have picked up all these yard drains to help. There was no drainage. Everything pretty much ran towards the building. So we were able to build up and get some positive drainage away from the front of the building, pick it all up in the school system and get it to here. We have riprap plunge pools on the discharges, and S&E controls with hay bales and silt fence on the intake and inlets. We have various, because of we're working mostly within paved area, we have small little topsoil stockpiles surrounded by silt fence on the periphery, because we're not going to have a lot of soil, and we don't want to truck it all over the site and increase any disturbance we don't need. So we have an anti-tracking pad. We have these little topsoil storage areas wrapped in silt fence, perimeter silt fence that we have. And again, we have way more islands than were required. We're going to have more than twice the required trees, and we're using swamp maple, river birch, red maple, and other wetland habitat trees, along with habitat plantings along the edge of the basins here. This is going to be more of a mowed basin. We're going to have a maintenance for it being rough mowed or hedge, with a brush hog every year. When it's a dry season, cut it down roughly plus or minus 6 inches. And other maintenance it will need. And that's basically it. Again, we tried to stay within the confines of the site. We were required to have 54 spaces. We have 55. And again, it's really a renovation of an existing site that when we first saw it, literally looks like nobody's put any money into renovations on the site for many years. It has no trees in the parking lot except in the front. And the few that they have, or some are not in very good shape. So we think this is, if you show the final plan, the renderings, Shannon, thank you. And this is the final plan. You can see the basin in the yard, basin 1, and basin 2 in the back. We're using a biofiltration berm, a very shallow wet basin there. Again, that's size more than we need for the cubic foot flow capacity for this. And we think it's a much more attractive plan. It's going to be a very solid use for this. And that's, we've entertained any questions.
Okay, Rich?
I don't have any questions.
Emily?
I'm sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. I have no questions. Apologize.
No problem. I think we've all had that problem at one time or another. Dave?
I was wondering about the drainage to the 2 basins. Are there any catch basins within the paved area? You mentioned some yard drains.
Yeah, I'll go back to the estimate. Yes, in the front yard, there's only one catch basin. It's there. We pick up yard drains in all these other low areas, but this area there's only one. That's there. That's their only catch basin on site. We're going to reset it. We're going to put a deeper sump and put hood on it. The other yard drains we picked up so we could. Right now, there's no positive drainage away from the base of the building. I don't know how the thing doesn't get flooded all the time. They have a very active sump pump system that goes out the back. You can see the dashed line going out to the wetlands through the back parking lot, and that's their sump pump discharge. Other than that, this thing now pretty much sheet flows out right into the wetland. So we've regraded it subtly, and we're intercepting it in this northern basin, the western basin, which is basin number 2, and doing renovation and water quality treatment there. So there are no structures other than that one in the front parking lot.
Okay, so just all sheet flow into that basin.
Yeah, right now it's all just sheet flow going into the wetland. So we're intercepting it with this and regrade it so subtly so we can get it into these water renovation basins. It was easy in the front because we're intercepting an old pipe system that we think is broken anyway, and creating that basin out in that open yard area. And we couldn't expand anywhere in this direction anyway because a lot of utilities are going over here. So, and again, it's kind of in a hole. There isn't a lot of topographic relief, so we weren't able to do as much topographic mitigation other than follow the existing, storm drainage, try to get a positive drainage away as minimal as we could away from the building and get it into a water renovation basin, which we've achieved. And again, like I say, we are all in the upland review area. We're not touching any of the wetlands, and we're not touching any of the forest edge.
It looks like the parking lot itself is almost abutting the basin. How much separation is there?
Now there's a 3-foot shoulder, and then it drops. Then there's the apron of the basin, and then the basin itself. We have a very narrow area to work it with.
How close does the berm on the back of the basin? How close is that to the wetland?
There's let's see this. I'd say it's about 15 feet. Oh, the back of the berm itself, probably 5 feet to 10 feet. Maybe a little less. It's tight in there, but we've kept it out, and it rises there too. So and then it drops down to keep going a little to your right, Shannon. Yeah, that's where it drops down. That's where we think that's where it gets shallow there. So there's kind of a berm. If you go to the left of the berm, there's a finger of high point that kind of rounds around here. So we're kind of mirroring that peninsula of rise there. And then the berm takes over and filters out to the northwest into the wetland system.
Okay, that's all I have at this point.
Thanks, Dave. Robert?
Oh, wait, I must add something. We couldn't go further to the south of that basin too, because if you see, there's a stream corridor, there's a natural swale right there. And it rises up to the north of that and then and to the south. So we didn't want to get in, disturb the existing swale that's already there. So that's what that kind of constrained us to the south. And that's why we've had to make this elongated configuration going north from where we started.
Okay, Robert?
So Biff, the drainage basin you were talking about, that's number one that you were just describing?
Yes.
Two.
Wait, oh, that's two. Yeah, one is out in the lawn, excuse me.
Okay, so then for drainage basin number two, there's not a single discharge point. It's sheet flow over the end?
It's so flat, we were able to have a flat edge along, like I say, it's higher on the south side. See where the lilac arrow comes in saying 1,506 cubic foot water thing? That's the natural grade there is higher than to the northwest. So we're using the berm and its natural grade change there to filter out through the berm after it sits and settles in this wet bottom basin.
Great, thank you. And then for the other basin number one, where is the discharge point for that? And how far away from the
There's an
wetland?
existing pipe that exists that discharges at the end there to the west, at the western terminus where the hand is right there. And
Okay,
we're putting a plunge pool in where there already is. Again, that's the only pipe. It comes from an old catch basin. This is pretty much where we're putting the new one. Goes around the building and sinks and it ends up right there. So we're really just pulling the pipe back. It has no plunge pool, no apron for discharge or anything, which we're going to institute.
Okay, great. And I guess the question, and Mr. Chairman, when we get to the point, I think this would be one, although there's no direct work in the wetlands, given how extensive the upland review work is, I'd favor taking a look. And then when we're out there, we can see if that plunge pool for basin number one can be pulled back to give a little more separation to the wetlands. And then the last question I have is, what's the fate? You showed the dotted line for the sump discharge. Is that remaining, or is that going to be changed with the redevelopment?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I get your question.
Yeah, right now there's an existing discharge from the sump. Is that remaining, or is that going to be terminated with the reconstruction?
We were going to leave it, but if it turns out that we can daylight it into right now, we're not sure how deep it is, but if we can, it exists now, but if we can if it turns out we can daylight it into the basin, we certainly would do that.
Okay, good. That's the end of my comments. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Robert. Mark? Mark? Did we lose him?
Still there.
No, see him there.
Hang on. I got the chat feature going. So he got disconnected and he's having an issue calling back in. Mark, do you want to type in? Do you have any comments? Real quick. Yeah, I'm not sure, Mr. Chair. I think he's offline at the moment. So, because he logs in with his computer, but then also has to call in to have the audio. So if he gets disconnected, we'll
go to Jay then for the time being.
Certainly.
Mark comes back. Jay?
Oh, I don't have any questions.
All right, well, filling space to see if Mark can get back in. I do have a couple of questions.
This is Ned. I have some questions.
I apologize, Ned.
Okay. On the south end, I'm looking at the grading and drainage plan, but are those dumpsters and like the the southwest corner there?
Yes.
Okay, so now, is there gonna be a wall or fencing? Because I know, I mean, the dumpster areas tend to get really dirty, and I'd hate to see
No, that's totally enclosed. That's a totally enclosed dumpster.
it's enclosed.
Yes, it's on the detail sheets. You'll see, three sides of it are enclosed in a wooden fence, and then if the gates are, we're using chain link with HDP, high density
Yeah.
polyethylene slats in them. We found that those gates are much better because we put wooden gates on these. Once they get hit by a truck, they list over and they never get repaired, and they disappear. So we've had a lot of luck with that, and they'll be from all three sides that anybody can see them other than driving up to them from the inside. You will not be able to see into them. And you should be able to barely see through the slats. We did the same thing on Brick Walk when we did the additions in the back and the renovations for that.
Okay, and then just below that, you have some stone. Is that going to be runoff from the parking area into that that, I don't know if that's a stream right away or the crosshatched area?
That's a good question. We had to put a little apron there because they have to have access. If you, Sharon, Shannon, if you take your finger and show behind the dumpster there and go up that easement, that's a gravel driveway that goes into the wetlands to the electrical to the satellite, or I guess I don't know what sort of towers they are, but they could be microwave towers or something. I'm not sure, but they need access there. So we put a little lip there so they don't erode.
Right here.
Yeah.
It's that same driveway.
Yeah. So we've added some gravel as an apron there, so when they can drive through the parking and when they have access to that and get onto their gravel road and go up there. If you see my rendering, it shows it. It should show it pretty clearly. Yeah. See, there's the existing gravel, and we just added a little bit of apron to connect them up to that, so they could get onto their access drive.
Okay. And what is this crosshatch area? That's a right of way for the stream, or?
That's a right of way for the company that maintains and owns the towers in the back.
Okay. And then my other question is, so on this project, the footprint of the building is not changing at all?
That is correct.
Okay. And is the runoff, the roof runoff, how is that addressed?
We're picking all of it up. There are only a few roof leaders. We're picking all that up in front. You can see that they come into the yard drains in front.
Okay.
In the back, everything just sheet flows. There's not enough topographic relief to discharge them any other way.
Okay.
But they were all accounted. All that area was accounted for the renovation, water quality renovation basins.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Sorry, Ned. Is Mark back on?
Yes, I have no questions.
Okay. Man, I've got a couple. I did not have a chance to really take a look at this before the meeting. So can you explain how you propose to construct the filtration berm?
I think there's specifications on the plan, if I remember correctly, and George can correct me. It has an internal core of coarse sand and pea stone and wrapped in Marafi 140, and then on top it has modified riprap.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
But we have the spec called out on it. It should be on the grading and drainage sheet, I believe.
Yeah, no, I just didn't have a chance to take a look, so I was just looking for
That's quite all right.
Explanation. I'll be formal tonight, Mr. Logan. The silt sock, I mean, you know me, I prefer the silt socks versus the silt fence, especially where you've got wetlands involved. So that may be something you want to take a closer look at.
Sure, I'll do
The
that.
other question I have for you is, given with what the water flows are like out there in the wetland area, were you able to do any investigation in terms of any vernal pools out there?
No, my delineation was done, obviously, just after, when was it? I'm trying to remember now. It was February, I think, or January.
December, I think.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. All the time. So no, I haven't done that. So maybe between now and the next time I could take a look.
Yeah, I'm just curious as to whether or not any of that area may have given you an indication that there could be some vernal pools out there, especially seeing as how, what, this property was maybe constructed in the 50s. So
Like
there really
early
hasn't been anything
60s.
done
Yeah.
out there, so.
Yeah, there are a few points to the south. There is an area that's probably has a foot of water. It's closer to the road. And then on the north side, there's several areas. Some of them are a little further away that probably also could have a foot of water or so. So it wouldn't hurt for me between now. I think we're going to have a warming trend, I'm told.
Well, I've heard the same thing, but I don't believe the weatherman.
Yeah, well, you and I too. So maybe I can be a little more definitive about that at the next meeting.
No, that would be appreciated. Again, just to have some idea, you know, if we are dealing with anything out here.
Sure.
And the one other comment I will make, having grown up probably about a 5-minute walk from this place, I fully understand what you mean by having a very complex system of your little catch basins, or not catch basins, but the sump pumps in the building, because our house is originally just right down the road, and we've got 2 of them there, and they're still filled every spring and in the wintertime. So I can appreciate what the groundwater is like in this area. So if that's something that could maybe tie it off into the water basin that you're putting out there, that might be a little bit better than just having it run out. So, you know, I think that's one of the things you said we're thinking about doing anyway.
Okay. Good point. The one thing, if you remember George's photograph, the whole northern half of Basin 2 on the western side, right now they used to be foundations for a group of satellite dishes there. So that's been very disturbed area. So we tried to utilize the areas that we had available, but that area was eminently usable. So when you saw the photograph where he showed you his car in the background, and then in the front you saw some concrete cones and stuff, that's the area pretty much where the basin comes to, on Basin 2 in the back.
I can tell you for sure that western boundary, the wetland used to be probably into the parking lot originally. And that has been filled and then ditched. So that's all disturbed areas, and then nothing's natural there.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
I had another question.
Ned? Go ahead.
There's, I guess with the previous use of the building for the broadcast school, there's some antennas behind the building. Are those tied to this property in any way, or?
The old ones there used to be some where we have the basin in the west, but the ones you can still see now are off the property, but they have to access it on that gravel road that we had to keep, which it goes over the culvert pipe that George was talking about, which is really almost, yeah, right in Shinnehead, right in there. They build up a driveway with gravel on the culvert right there, and to get up into that little pocket of upland area that he showed you on his general soils map. And there's a complex in there with the towers and some utility building or 2. I've never been back. I've seen them on aerials, but I've never been back in that area because it's pretty inaccessible with all the snow, and then it's pretty boggy right now.
Biff, there might be a couple of cases, and I'm not sure, I think you might have to look at the plan where there's guide wires that extend into the site. So they might be,
but they're in the wetland area, and they're easements you'll see on the plan. There's some easements, right, but they go back. If you look at, see where it says upland review off to the north of the existing building. Well, no, the other one. See that long hatched area that goes diagonally across the plan?
Oh, here.
Yeah, that's where the guide wires would be. That's an easement for their guide wires. That's in the wetland off our area, so.
Well, yeah, but here's my question. And I understand that I see the road, and I'm looking at Google Earth, and I see the cell tower with all the cell tower antennas and stuff, but then there's also 3 towers. Now, if I remember, I mean, when this is a broadcast school, those were tied into the school. Now, is there any kind of relationship between
No,
the change of use and the tower and those towers? I mean, who's responsible for those towers now? If this is no longer a broadcasting school, who's responsible for those towers?
those towers are a separate entity. Whatever the easement says, I can look up the plan right now. Give me a second. But the school used to have satellite dishes. And those are where those concrete, the stumped up little, yeah, right in there. And we're taking those out as part of basin 2.
Yeah, they show up on Google Earth. I see the satellite basins, but then it looks like there's 3 antennas in addition to the cell tower. And I just wasn't sure if they were, if somebody
Are
has
you referring to
responsibility.
these?
Yeah.
So, okay, but those are up. So here's the property line here.
Yeah, they're
So
not
here's the property line. And these towers are on the property behind. This property behind is quite extensive.
The company's called Easement in favor of Sprint Spectrum. So they own and maintain those towers.
Okay, so they're still being used.
Yes, absolutely. And they have no relationship with the facility.
Okay.
And the one off the diagonal one we were telling you about, that is a guy wire easement, again, for Spirit,
yeah,
whatever they're called.
Okay, I just want to make sure that
it's got to be for this tower. It's got to be the tieback for this tower.
Yeah, that's correct.
I just
But
want
again,
to make
that's
sure.
off of, we're not going near there, or that's in the woods and into the wetlands. We're not going anywhere near their stuff.
Okay, I just want to make sure it wasn't an abandoned tower that
No,
nobody's responsible for anymore.
Those are like the 1,400-foot towers that are out there. And then there's also, I think it's about a 200-foot cell tower that's up there.
Yeah, I know,
also.
I could see the cell tower, but I
But
wasn't
yeah,
sure.
these are 1,400-foot towers. So between the two of them, they average 1,400 feet in height.
Yeah, these are the ones, this is where the old satellite dishes were, the one that's, yeah.
These are these that are showing up there. You can see the red and white.
There's
They're
two, and
they're
there's
in-
another one on the right you can't see.
Right, it's off the edge, but it's this guy here has the tieback, so you can see the guy wire. There's the turnbuckle for one of them coming down in.
Shannon, could you go back to the previous photograph? The one in back? Yeah. This is where they used to have concrete bases for satellite dishes. This is going to be the foreground here is the northern part of our basin 2. And then going towards George's car in the back is the end of the southern part of that basin. So this area, as he said, has been previously just built up and disturbed, and they have all sorts. We're taking this out, and this is where the basin's going to be. Also, our pavement edge is pushed back a bit from here too. I was fortunate to consolidate the parking and move in from the envelope that already exists. Like I said, we decrease coverage so we don't have to have detention. That's why we could focus on all the water renovation quality basin areas.
Okay, I just want to make sure that the school closing didn't end up leaving abandoned towers somewhere that nobody was responsible for.
No, those are active, and we don't have any responsibility for them.
Okay, thank you.
Good question, though.
Any other questions from folks? No. So my take on this one is going to be similar to what we did the last time. Need to get a motion to accept the application.
So move, Stanchion.
Is there a second?
Mark, second.
Any discussion, comments, questions? No, hearing none. We have a motion to approve or accept the application. Those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining. So we've accepted the application. Based on what Robert was saying, I think he'd like to see a site walk. I think, again, with some of the comments that have come up about how it's sort of a tight site, it may not be a bad idea to go out there. What's other
Yeah, I
folks
think
doing?
it's so close to the wetlands. It's probably not a bad idea.
So we don't need a formal motion on that, do we, Shannon?
No, but it'd be helpful. So I've got it recommended in the agenda review for March 27th or 28th, rather than the weekend right before the meeting, because the weekend right before the meeting is Easter weekend.
Good thinking.
the 20, I try to look at these things ahead of time. I don't always get it, but the 27th is Passover, the 28th is Palm Sunday. I don't know, I don't know if we can do the morning of the 27th, if that works. At 8, 8:30 or 9, something like that. That's a Saturday morning.
I guess I should jump in on the Passover comment and say that that's okay as long as it's before dusk.
Before
Should be okay.
sundown. Sure.
It's okay by me as long as I remember to set an alarm.
Yeah.
I have an information question. Do you want us there with you, or would you rather see it yourself?
It might, if you or George is available, it's probably, it would be helpful, but it's not necessary. And it's fairly straightforward, but if either one of you are available, we welcome you having us join.
I might combine it with looking at potential habitats out there.
Yeah, so let us know, just let us know when. I'm sure I'll get out to try and get out there. I'd be glad to, just show you, I can show you how much we're pulling back the pavement and everything, so.
That'd be appreciated.
And the wetlands are flagged, you said, George?
Yes, they're flagged, and
Okay.
our Arctic flagging should be there good for 5 years.
Okay.
Okay, so it sounds like we've landed on the 27th. Is 8:30 a reasonable time with
It's fine with me.
not being crazy early, but still allows I'm seeing head nods from those that have cameras on. So we're gonna go with 8:30 on the Saturday, the 27th.
There's a Dunkin' Donuts between the house and the site. Actually got one. You got
You got one everywhere.
Rebel Dog right up on the corner.
There's Rebel Dog around the corner. Yeah,
Yeah, that's true.
that's high octane stuff.
Okay.
Okay.
So I think we're okay then on this one.
Yep, and I'm presuming we'll wait on the determined significance till after the site walk.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Alrighty.
Okay.
Great. Thank you both for joining us.
A pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item, Rivera 16 Clearbrook update.
Yes. And we technically should do a modification to the agenda, if you'll indulge me, and if somebody is willing to make a motion. They did also submit an application for the work, the additional work in their backyard for their swimming pool. So if we could, we're going to hear both of them together.
1179.
Excuse me?
Did you want to switch that with 1179? Or
No,
not?
so we can do the 16 Clearbrook. So it'll be 16 Clearbrook because they'll do the, they're on, they can discuss both matters, but I'm just trying to keep it clean. So they have an application that they submitted as well.
Okay, I misunderstood, sorry.
Sorry, yeah. So if we could just do a quick motion to modify the agenda to also include an application for 16, yeah.
Is there a second? Robert, I think you did the first.
I'll second Statchen.
Okay. Any discussion, comments, questions? Those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, abstaining? Okay, so it's modified.
Thank you. And I think we have both the homeowner and Ian Cole on this evening. I don't know which one of you want to take the lead with this, but you're welcome to jump in.
Sure. Good evening. For the record, Ian Cole, professional soil scientist, professional wetland scientist. I'm here tonight on behalf of the Riveras. The commission remembers last we met was back in January, in the beginning of the year. And then we discussed the enforcement order the Riveras got received for the unpermitted clearing of vegetation in the 150-foot upland review area. If the commission remembers, this was a scenario where vegetation was removed between the existing lawn and a conservation easement. We're talking about a 40-foot wide band of early successional habitat that was kind of cleared bisecting their property. And as you know, Shannon had stated at that January meeting, we discussed that the clearing was done in preparation for the planning of an in-ground pool. And so to that extent, at the recommendation of both town staff and the commission, it was expressed to come back to the commission with a comprehensive plan for all of the proposed activities in the backyard and kind of fold in a restoration plan for those activities in the upland review area. So, you know, here we are, we came back, we have our planned improvements and restoration activities for the commission's consideration. These plans were designed in coordination of a team. The Riveras hired Giuliano's Pool, a local landscaping company, Local Choice Landscaping. They worked with a landscape architect, Germain Designs, and again enlisted the survey services of Flynn and Sear Land Surveyors, as well as myself. Probably the easiest thing to do, Shannon, if you can go to my report that I submitted to the commission and go to page 5 of 11. I have the site plan in there. I've embedded it into the report, and it shows, you know, a little bit of color that maybe helps tell the story a little bit better for the commission. So here we have the property. To the left-hand side, that blue shaded area, that is the jurisdictional wetland boundary. The sliver of property between that blue polygon and the hatched proposed lawn area, that dashed line is the actual conservation easement that is marked in the field by 4x4 posts with signage on them. The Riveras, before they started any of their activities on their property regarding the clearing, they had a land surveyor stake out the property line and the conservation easement to make sure that they did not encroach into those areas. I think, as was last reported, just for the commission's edification, it clearly no clearing occurred within those regulated areas of the conservation easement, and certainly not within the wetlands proper. So I guess the first thing I'll go over is probably the overall plan is probably the easiest thing to start with. So the yellow polygon we have on here, this is the bulk of the backyard improvements. We can see there's an outline of a pool and some terraced retaining walls that come down to the pool. There's about a 6 to 7 foot elevation change from, say, the backyard where you come off the deck to where you drop down to the pool. So to minimize the footprint of grading, there's 2 boulder retaining walls that drop down to the pool. All the material for grading on the site is really going to be recruitment from the excavation for the pool. So we'll have the beneficial reuse of that. We're not anticipating importing any materials. This isn't a big earth moving activity. The backyard here is very flat. We have a 0 to 3% slope. You know, so it's really a low erosion and sediment control risk site from that standpoint. Really, it's so flat back there. It would be very hard to even get any sheet flow to concentrate, or there's really no mechanism for velocities on here to migrate material down into the wetland. But prior to the start of activities, regardless, around the perimeter, it's a little hard to make out in this photo because it's reduced, but we are installing ENS controls along the perimeter as the first step in this project. The ENS controls I'm recommending for this site would either be staked bales of conservation hay that are free of seed heads, or straw wattles, or, you know, commonly referred to as silt socks, also stake that grade. And the reason for that and not doing a traditional silt fence, excuse me, is, you know, I view it as an unnecessary disturbance so close to the conservation easement and the wetlands to tow it in, specifically because the ground conditions here are very armored with extremely stony soils. So just the physical putting that into the ground would necessitate, you know, a small mini excavator or something like that with a trench bucket, you know, to really keep the footprint minimal along that sensitive feature. So for that reason and the level topography, I would recommend something less invasive for E&S controls. The hatched area, it would be establishment of lawn. So we're putting in some additional lawn area. Again, this is all in the area that was cleared in preparation for this project. And then the green areas we can see kind of bookending the project are 2 areas, both north and south of upland restoration. For these areas, we're proposing a New England wildflower conservation seed mix. This is kind of a dual, like providing pollinator habitat along with a wildflower mix. We're also proposing to install 12 shrubs along the conservation easement. In the northern limits, we're proposing to plant 6 viburnum. And then in the southern section, you'll see we're proposing an additional 6 plantings down there. These plantings will be, the standard 3 foot by 4 foot height containers. The material we're planning to source from New England New England wetland plants up there in Amherst. I guess generally the square footage numbers here, we're proposing about 3,000 square feet of pollinator habitat with those shrubs. So, we'll have a nice ecotone transition up to that tree line. So it won't just be such a stark contrast where it goes from tree line to lawn. We'll soften that area up. So that's about 3,000 square feet. The pool area, those improvements, those hard improvements, that is about 3,000 square feet. So the upland restoration area offsets kind of those harder scape features. And then the established lawn is about 6,000 feet, which probably over 2,500 of that was existing lawn. So we're proposing an additional 2,000 square feet of lawn from what was proposed. And again, one last small feature that I didn't point out, in the southern section, there will be a playscape put in for the kids. But this is just a kind of, carefree building kind of scenario where it's a temporary feature, as long as kids use the swing set, right? That only lasts for 5 years. So, from a high level, that is the project that's being proposed. Again, I think it's important to highlight, no disturbance into the conservation easement or the wetland. And I guess the last thing I'll leave the commission with is at its closest point, the activities will be 25 feet from the wetland proper. And I think it's important to note that the sensitive part of the wetland is the inflow channel part of the wetland. There's an intermittent water course that runs along the extreme western limits of the property, and we're over 60 feet from that. And again, this is a 60-foot vegetated buffer that's very, very flat. In my report, if we could scroll down, there's some figures and some background information so we can see the limits of what was done. So on page 6 of the report, if you remember, this goes back to 2009. It kind of shows the conditions of what the backyard was. Here we can see kind of in the middle there where the cursor is kind of early successional habitat. And then we have a forested area to the north of that clearing. If we scroll down to the next figure on page 7, in contrast, this is 10 years later, 2019. Again, we can see the area that was cleared, shrubby, early successional habitat. We can see the establishment of the lawn there, kind of in the center of the property where it says lot 16. And then we'll move along to figure 4 on page 8. This is just a bird's eye view of the property. We can see kind of that hole in the middle of the forest canopy there was that early successional habitat. And then, you can see in relation where the water course lingers along the western property line. Moving along to page 9, I have a couple photos of what the area looked like prior to the vegetation removal activities in the upland review area. Might be a little bit hard to see, but in photo 1, we kind of can see that tree line in the background there. That is essentially the tree line of the conservation easement that's staked out. So everything that's in the foreground here, this is the type of vegetation that was removed. Again, you can see mostly saplings, smaller stuff, shrubby stuff. And so these photos were taken in November 2020, right before the vegetation removal occurred. If we go to page 10, the upper photo, photo 3, that is standing in the northeast corner, looking back to the south, kind of giving you the long perspective of what's going on out here. If we go to figure 4, this is probably the best photo for perspective, where we can see you have the edge of the existing lawn, and then we have that kind of 40-foot wide strip. That vegetation was removed. That's all that early successional habitat. And you can see the tree line in the background. That kind of matches the tree line from the November 2020 photos. So again, we can see both, from these photos and from what's out in the field that we did not encroach into that conservation easement. Probably the best photo to show that is photo 11, where we can see in the foreground the original posting of the conservation easement, and then immediately to the left of that is the surveyor's stakes. There were several stakes along the tree line of where the conservation easement is, so that it was very easy to line up and follow. Very helpful. And then the last photo that's on here, just to give some context of what's happening within that tree line, is this photo is a representation of the wetlands that are adjacent to the site, or off to the western side of the site. Again, it's kind of very flat, early shrubs. You can see in the background, that's the water course that's just off site. And again, you can see from this, very stony ground conditions. Once you get into the conservation easement, basically the wetlands there, it's all ridgeberry, Lester soils, very stony, somewhat poorly drained to very poorly drained, kind of depending on where you are within the wetland. That's it in a nutshell. If the commission has any questions, I'd be happy to field them.
Rich, any questions?
No, I don't have any questions.
Emily?
I have no questions at this time. Thank you.
Dave?
Questions?
Robert?
First comment is, it looks like a really comprehensive plan, so thank you. And what's the overall construction schedule from when it starts to when the work will be completed?
I guess I'll defer that question to you, Adam. You're probably closer to talking to the contractors and vendors to provide the most realistic schedule.
Sure. So I think the pool is scheduled to be started on May 20th. They estimate it takes a week to 2 weeks to get the actual pool in, at which point then they would start doing the retaining walls and some of the other work and putting in the lawn and so on. So, my hope, Commissioner, is that it's done. We have a pad in around the pool, and we have grass seed down, by middle to the third week in June. But having seen how these things go, my guess is it may take a little bit longer, but that's the timeline. So May 20th is when we're targeting the start of the project. Great,
Thanks. So, and my concern was really over how much work potentially would be happening in the spring when things are a lot wetter. But I can certainly understand you're going to want the pool in for use this summer. So appreciate the feedback. Thank you.
Mark?
Yeah, the only question I have is the green area where we're putting shrubs, and is that in the conservation area? If not, how close is it?
No, it is not in the conservation easement. It is right along the line. Part of the reason for putting it along the line is also to provide double duty of, a physical boundary and marker, another reminder of, hey, I shouldn't go past the shrubs that we just planted. But no, we're not encroaching into the conservation easement.
That's it. That's all, Bob.
Okay, thanks. Ned?
Yeah, just looking at the plan, you're going to remove 4 additional trees near the swing set?
Yeah, I mean, so those 4 trees were slated to be removed when the arborist and landscaping company was assessing, tree health. But they stopped because as soon as they got notice from the town with the enforcement order, they immediately stopped work. and started to resolve that issue. So that was an outstanding item. And again, those trees are close to the house, and obviously, with a playscape there, nobody wants, some widowmaker above their kid while they're swinging on the set. So that's the intent there.
What are those trees?
I'd have to look. There may be, from the best of my recollection, there were some hemlocks in that area and maples.
Okay. I just, there's been a lot of clearing done out there, and I'm just kind of disappointed that we're still continuing with the clearing there. I don't know. There isn't another place to put the swing set.
Yeah, I mean, we've moved things around quite a lot on this plan, moving the pool around, moving the swing set. We think this is the most logical place. These trees are not in great condition right now, I can tell you, and they're up against my house, causing quite significant damage, in fact, to the house. And contributing to a lot of mold and fungus on my house. And in talking with arborists and the landscapers and the landscape architect and Ian, I think everyone agrees, these are not specimen trees. They're not adding any value. They're not that healthy. And there's frankly loads of trees all around there and behind there that go into into sort of that naturalized area. And then certainly within the conservation. So that's the best spot for the swing set for us.
Okay, I didn't get from the plan that these are kind of encroaching in on the house. But I guess if they're doing that, then that seems reasonable.
It's not, you're right, Commissioner. It's not the best depiction. They're actually much closer to that deck right there, that far deck that you see. In fact, I'm standing in my office, which is right next to them. And when you're standing on that deck, you can reach out and touch the tree branches. That's how close they are to the house at this point. So it's probably on me. I should have been more attuned to the landscape architect to make that more clear that that's actually closer to the house than they are.
Okay. All right. That's all I had.
Jay?
Just a couple of quick things, and they're not really questions necessarily, but I'll just throw them out there. I hadn't caught about the trees, but I do always kind of take notice when I hear about tree removal, but it sounds like what they're talking about doing makes a lot of sense. This is maybe a more procedural thing, and I don't know if this is the right time to ask it. Are we dealing with two different things here? Are we still dealing with a cease and desist and the application? To whoever, then Bob, whoever wants to answer that.
Yes, it is both. We're hearing about both matters simultaneously, because for a cohesive presentation, but there will be two votes.
Okay, that's kind of what I thought. I appreciate that, and that's really all I have. Thank you.
Okay, I've got, I guess, one comment, one question. And if you've heard my comments earlier, your comment about using the straw wattle, silt sock, that's my preference, especially when you're up against a wetland area. The question that I have is, with the lawn that's being proposed, is that going to be an irrigation system also installed?
So yes, I think we would be putting an irrigation system. The rest of the property has an irrigation system. We haven't had the irrigation company out as of yet, but the expectation would be that there would be irrigation.
The primary reason I'm asking is based on your comment earlier that maybe like the third week in June, you're now starting to get into that season where you can put grass seed down, but if you're out there with a hose, don't expect much to grow. So that's why I was just curious if you're also talking about an irrigation system, so that this way there's a chance that the grass will actually grow in 2021.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. I mean, I'll have to tell my wife that I know we're looking at the costs and everything is just going up and up and up, and now irrigation as well. And one of the landscape folks said, I'm going to have to put another 2 zones or 3 zones, and I don't even know what that means. But apparently, I just see dollar signs, frankly. But I think it's the right thing to do since the rest of the property has it already.
Okay, no, I was just curious about that, because I mean, to me, then it makes more sense with the time frame that you're talking about to be able to stabilize the backyard. So that's why I was asking.
Sure.
I don't have any other questions. So Um, on this, Shannon,
Mhm.
I'm seeing accept application or determine if pool installation and backyard improvements are permitted as of right. So we need to make a determination on that.
Correct. Right, so looking at it from the in-ground pool standpoint. So, right, so we're looking at the in-ground pool retaining wall and that work within the 150-foot upland review area. Similar to what we've done with other homeowners that have come in with wanting to put an in-ground pool in their backyard. So whether or not we feel a full permit is warranted, which the homeowner has filled out and submitted the application, so we do have it on file, or the commission can determine for section 4B that it's a permitted as a right use for a residential zone.
I'll go around and ask people what they think. We'll start at the other end. Jay?
Oh, God, I was afraid you were going to have me for, to be honest with you, I'm not really sure. I'm not sure how to, I'm trying to remember the rules of as of right. And I guess my concern is, do we determine that being that there's still cease and desist activity that we have to address?
Right,
And I don't know.
The
I don't
cease
know
and
if that
desist
makes
is going to be voted on next.
Yeah, I understand that. The fact that that exists, does that impinge on us at all determining that it's as of right? And maybe the answer to that question is no, but that's just what occurs to me. Does that make sense at all, what I'm saying?
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'll jump in if you want to and start the dialogue.
Okay, thanks, Robert.
Yeah, I would,
Robert.
I'll just sort of set aside the cease and desist. So if we were looking at this without that background, I would say it falls within the section 4 allowance. Use as of right, all of the work is in the upland review area. So while it's regulated, I think it's use as of right, normal enjoyment of the residential property.
Thank you.
But for specification, that's for the proposed pool and like the couple of retaining walls that they're talking about installing, correct?
Correct.
And the play yard.
Yeah, all the upland review area work.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it's the area shaded in the yellow. Okay, so Jay, does that help?
Yes. Thank
Okay,
you.
any comments then?
Nope.
Okay, Ned?
I think it's a approved use.
Okay, Mark?
I would say the same as approved use.
Okay, Robert, you started it off. Dave?
I'll agree with that.
And Emily?
I will agree. This seems like approved use to me.
Rich?
I'll, that's fine with me.
Yeah, and I agree with my colleagues. I think it falls in under that section of the regs. So we need to make, no, we don't need to make a formal,
Yes, please. So I've got it. Yep. So if we can do a motion and a second for this is permitted as a right use.
okay.
For section 4.
So Robert, you want to make that motion?
Yes, so moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second it, Ned.
Okay, any comments, questions? Okay, hearing nothing. Those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, abstaining? Okay, so the pool and the retaining wall section is resolved.
Yep.
Next thing on the agenda is, do people need to take a site walk on this or not?
I do not feel the need for it.
I mean, I don't either. I think right now, the way the plan is laid out, it's in pretty good shape. And I think that as long as town staff is kept up to date with what's going on with the different activities, then it's fine by me. I wouldn't need a site walk. Anybody else?
I don't need a site walk.
I don't think
Nope.
I need one.
Don't need one.
All right, so it's sounding like we don't need one, Shannon.
Okay.
Now we have to deal with the cease and desist, right? And that's on the restoration plan?
Correct.
Okay.
So
What's your
it's re-
flavor on this, folks? I mean,
yeah, it's really the areas in green or the restoration effort portion of the plan.
yeah, but it also, to me, it also ties in with the grass area too. I mean, I would think.
Sure.
And that's why I was asking before about the irrigation system, to make sure that what's being proposed is going to grow, so that you're not creating some runoff issues into the conservation area and potentially the wetlands. So, I mean, I'll go on this one. I mean, I don't have a problem with the restoration plan. I think what they're proposing works. Like I said, I would like to see the straw wattles in place. I just think it's a better way of going, especially when you've got wetlands that are relatively close by. But that's kind of where I'm at. Jay?
Stop picking on me. I think it's okay. I mean, I'm not really sure what to say, so.
Well, that's fine.
Yeah.
Ned?
Yeah, I think the this restoration plan and Ian Cole's report kind of gives us all the background we need, and I think they're meeting the obligations, of restoration for the site.
Okay. Mark?
As I discussed earlier about where, if it was in the conservation area, I'm fine with this, what they're doing in that area.
Okay. Robert?
Yeah, I agree. It's an appropriate restoration plan. I think there was the appropriate time and effort and thought put into it. I would agree that the preferred soil and erosion control would be silt sock or wattles, as discussed by Commission already and presented by Ian Cole. I think the conservation easement markers at 50-foot intervals should be reinstalled as part of the restoration plan. And that all parties doing work in the backyard receive a copy of Ian Cole's restoration plan, and that town staff be notified prior to commencement of work. I think those would all be appropriate things to include along with approval of the restoration plan. End of comments.
Emily?
I think that I am fairly comfortable with this.
Okay. Rich?
I agree with Bob's comments.
Yeah, the only other thing that I have is just trying to figure out what we're looking at for a timeline, because it sounds like by getting the pool in, the lawn itself is perhaps sometime in June. It could go into July possibly, again, not knowing what the pool contractors are like under time crunch. I mean, last year you couldn't buy an above ground pool because everybody wanted one, so you couldn't find them. So I don't know what it's going to be like installing this kind of a pool. But I'm thinking that this should probably be in place by maybe July. I mean, that's kind of pushing it because you start getting into the dry season. But if there's going to be an irrigation system installed, I think that may be okay. Just trying to come up with what we're looking at for a timeline on the restoration plan. I mean, Shannon, I don't know if you guys have talked about that, but I mean, does that sound like reasonable approach?
We hadn't, yeah, Ian, what are your thoughts for planting and plant availability too? Because I know sometimes it can be hard to get these.
So the seed mix and the plantings for the restoration, those would be readily available throughout the season. But
Okay.
Bob does bring up a good point about the lawn and getting later in the season and getting grass to grow can be a challenging thing. But if there is an irrigation system in place, that can certainly help the situation go a little bit longer. I guess the one thing I would add for the commission's level of comfort is, part of the restoration plan, as with always with these things, there's the standard language in there that, we're going to monitor this throughout the growing season and come back to the commission in December with a report. And so during that monitoring period, I'll be recommending corrective actions. So certainly if seed has not taken well on the site, we can reestablish that in September. God forbid it didn't take. And in the interim, we can keep the ENS controls up and establish temporary cover with chopped straw and stuff like that. But the other thing we can do is impress upon the vendors doing this work that establishment of the lawn is of the utmost importance to stabilize the area. So maybe there's some phasing that could occur where those activities could be done maybe a little bit more upfront or in parallel with some of the other landscaping features.
I was wondering if the restoration areas, given that they're at the corner, at least for the wetland mix and the plantings, the 12 shrubs that are going in, the mountain laurels and the viburnum, are they out of the way enough? Could they go in sooner?
Yes.
And have some of the spring weather to get established rather than waiting to go in July when the pool's
certainly. I think we can establish those areas earlier in the growing season, and I believe that they're outside of the I'll call it the active construction envelope,
right,
where they wouldn't be impacted. And again, once those areas are stabilized, we would modify the ENS controls to basically stay in front of those areas that were restored, so that they are also protected from any construction activities.
Yeah, I would just add that our contractors are teed up. So as soon as we can remove that cease and desist, I can certainly have them start preparing their restoration areas for plantings, and then taking steps to prepare the lawn as much as possible, such that once the pool is in, they do any minimal grading that needs to be done, and then they get the lawn in straight away. Obviously, if they can deal with any rocks or anything that needs to be moved in advance, that's going to allow them to get the seed down as quickly as possible, which is I think what Commissioner Hannon is looking for, and also frankly what me and my wife are looking for as well. So we're aligned in that.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, I don't want to get too tight on the time frame, because in Mr. Rivera, I hope you have good success with your contractors, but we've seen enough projects where that you can plan it out, but getting them to show up and do the work is a whole separate challenge. So I think the sequencing for the restoration area makes sense. I was asking about the schedule more because I was concerned about work that would be occurring when it was potentially real soupy in the spring. But I think the point here is you're working in a fairly sensitive area. You'll have to work closely with your contractors. I hope they show up on time and do the work that you're expecting. But I don't want to get too bogged down on what the schedule needs to be, because weather and contractors are variables sometimes out of your control.
No, understood. I mean, but I think basically what we're trying to do is at least get an understanding of what the timeline is going to be for the restoration. And I think with what we're talking about right now, some of the mitigation area, the restoration area, that's something that may be able to go in earlier. And then the longer time frame is going to be the lawn, but I think at least we've got a better understanding. So if they can get the lawn in and established by the middle of September, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that's fine. But if there are portions that can get done earlier, I would like to see that as well. So I don't think we need to necessarily hold them to a particular day in a given month. But I think in general, to have this thing completed, by early fall, I think would probably be a good thing. And then starting on it sometime in the spring when they can. So I think that would work for them. I think it gives the contractors some time. It gives the owner time. And I think we get what we're also looking for.
And then, this is Ned. So we would, I think as part of the restoration plan, we would require a report back from the soil scientists either in the fall or winter. I mean, as to like how everything is taken.
Yeah, this is Ian. In the restoration plan, there's essentially 12 recommendations in that plan. And these are kind of the standard language stuff of, we'll monitor it for the growing season, report back to the commission by December 15th. We'll notify the town once we secure materials and lay them out. We'll notify the town once ENS controls in. Our monitoring report will be assessed off of two standards, one being the survivability of plants and if needed, replacement of those plants, and two, to ensure that no invasive species have propagated in the area as a result of our activities.
Okay, that sounds good.
Does. So Shannon, we don't need to include the timeline specifically, do we? Because I mean, we pretty much know what it is, or does that need to be included in a motion?
No, I'll make a note of it in the revised. So if I can get a motion that approves the restoration plan, and one that, because pretty much the restoration plan, some of these steps pretty much talk about some of that timing. So approve the restoration plan and authorize me to release the cease and desist so that the work can commence, then we should be good to go.
Okay. Somebody want to make the motion?
So I'll move to approve the restoration plan and lift the cease and desist order. And the restoration plan should include use of wattles or silt socks in lieu of silt fence to install 50-foot conservation easement markers, markers on 50-foot intervals, that all of the contractors receive a copy of the Ian Cole restoration plan, that notification prior to work occurring be made to the town staff for oversight and scheduling, and that the restoration areas be completed as soon as feasible in the spring.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any comments, questions, corrections, modifications?
This is Jay. Just for the record, I guess the reason why I asked the question that I asked was, I guess in my mind I was thinking, and I guess it really is 6 of one, half dozen of another. I guess I thought that before we took action on the as of right, we should be okay with and approve the restoration plan, and we did that. But I guess that's what I was thinking, and otherwise I have no other comment. Thanks.
I don't think the sequencing really mattered on it, Jay.
I guess not. I mean, it all worked out to be the same thing, but that was why I asked what I asked.
Okay. All right. So those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstaining? Okay, so it sounds like the contractors can start figuring out what they need to do.
Okay, and I will follow up with a letter, Ian and Adam, in a day or two. Hopefully you have it before the close of business on Friday.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks everyone, and we'll be in touch, Shannon.
Thank you.
Take care.
Okay.
Okay. Next on the agenda, 1179 Farmington Avenue.
And I believe we've got, I don't know, Bill Galsky, are you gonna start us off this evening, or?
Well, George can get right into it, I think.
Okay.
Okay, that's fine. Again, George Logan for the record. There is a report that I believe you have.
Yeah.
What I want to do is to just kind of give you the sort of the evolution of what has happened in the past few weeks. Boy, that looks big.
Yeah, sorry. I just gotta, there we go.
I was overwhelmed.
No, I know. Large enough so it's legible, and not so large that it's jumping off the page.
So the idea was, and I think, if we recall, one of the last things that Ed had to say at the last meeting, that's probably what now, a month and a half ago or something like that. He questioned, one of the things he questioned is why the 2 test pits that we did on the west side of Wetland A, where we wanted to do the original wetland replication, although we had encountered these massive, very firm layers at about 27, 29 inches or so, but there was not evidence of any water or any redoxamorphic features for that matter. And that kind of got me thinking that I probably had not figured the hydrology, at least the hydrology from what's happening below the ground, what you can see. And so we went, now these first pits were done in, I believe were done in January. These 2 second pits were done a month later or so. And you can see from the second page, and I'll show you where those are. These are, again, on the east side of wetland A. And you can see there that, and I gave a little more information this time that I think that the other thing that Ed was asking for. So I did it a little more of a soil scientist description than before. So we have at 15 inches at test pit C, we have a very firm, massive layer. That's a very fine sandy loam. And if you see the corollary at test pit D, it's a little higher up in the profile, and that's at 12. And we had water seeping at those two those two firm layers. And then, of course, underneath that first firm layer, there's another firm layer that's even more dense, extremely firm and massive. And that's the layer that we saw in earnest on test pits A and B on the other side. We didn't see the first restrictive layer as much. We didn't see it on that side, but we saw it on this side. And then what I did, and I'll show you in the plan in a little bit, is I said, okay, so it looks like we might have a little different geohydrology on this side, which kind of makes sense now that I look back at it. And so I went into the wetland and just used my auger, and I just want to get down, at least I did four locations. Where is the restrictive layer, which is perching the water in this wetland, wetland A? And so I put those boreholes, and you can see that it's kind of variable, which is kind of a little confusing, but you can see it's 3 feet, half a foot, 1 foot, and a little over 1.5 feet. So let's go to those pictures, and then we'll go to the plan after that, and I'll explain what we're doing. So this was test pit C, the first one of the second series. And you can see there's water in the bottom. There was snow back in January when we did the first test pits, but I did notice it was moist. The surface was moist, but I didn't see any evidence of hydrology below the surface. Well, here it's quite obvious, even though, yes, we do have a little more snow, so that might account for it a little bit. But it looks like it's, what I kind of determined was that there is and again, this is not definitive, but just based on what I did, it looks like the hydrology of the subsurface hydrology of wetland A, which we know is perched on these similar layers that we see here. And it's slightly depressional. So you have up to 1 foot or so of water in the central portions, a little less in the surrounding portions that I delineated as wetlands. Again, the delineation was basically done, as you might recall, based on predominantly wetland hydrology and wetland vegetation, because the soils weren't definitive everywhere. So I think what's going on is the water in wetland A is kind of slowly moving towards this eastern area and away from the western area. And I'm pretty convinced that's the case. So that means this is a much better area for us to ensure wetland hydrology. And so you can go to the next pictures and we can kind of see a little bit of sort of the landscape. Keep going, Shannon.
I want the next set. Okay.
Okay, so the next set is, you can see the two deep test pits. The one that's close is the second one, which is TPD. And the one that's further away, that's the first one. And you can see the flagging that I put up there indicating where these are. And while I was out there doing this work, Stanley's company allowed us to have everything surveyed as we were doing it. So that's good. There was a new topography done in that area, which was good, into the wetland. And you can see from that second picture, I'm in the wetland itself. The wetland boundary is about where the hand is. And then I'm looking out towards where the two test pits, the new test pits were done. Let's move to the next ones. And those are the two last ones. What the first one, number 5, shows you is kind of an example of I'm in the wetland. The wetland is inundated. I probably have 6 inches of inundation in that area. You can see that I've dug a hole in the middle, and that's one of the test holes where I was trying to determine exactly where that restrictive layer was, just to kind of verify it. And then the last picture just shows you the central portion of wetland A, shallow inundation, and that has about a foot of water at this point, or at that point when I took this picture. Now, if we can get to the plan, and maybe zoom in to the replication area a little bit. Maybe a little more. There we go. Great. You see a number of things. You can see the borehole locations of those 4, a cluster of 4 that I took. And then you can see the 2 test pits, D and C, fairly close together, but that kind of gives you an indication of what's going on there. What you see on the north portion of this new replication area is a hatched area. What we did is we went around and basically surveyed the edge of where the invasive species are. And for the most part, what we have is multiflora rose and a little bit of Japanese knotweed that's starting to get in there. And one of my thoughts was, one of the better ways to get rid of Japanese knotweed is to excavate it out. So I'm like, okay. And that takes care of most of it in that central area. Now, it also will take a few locust trees out and a couple of other smaller trees, but we could probably plant something back in that area. Again, just as the previous time, the plan here is to go no more than 3 feet deep. Obviously, we might have to go a little deeper at first and then realize the final grade with topsoil. And all those details hopefully will be the last iteration of this for the next time, which we were prepared to do, but we didn't exactly get there this time. And there are 2 sumps, and those are meant to replicate some of the amphibian habitat that we're losing from wetland B, that portion that was the temporary sed basin that happened. And one of the questions that Ed had asked, and I think it's still on the table, is how can we ensure that we can have proper hydrology here? So let's look at wetland A. Wetland A has a very restrictive layer that's anywhere from a foot, in a couple places, I guess even less, but a foot to no more than 3 feet below the surface. Very dense, massive, that's perching the water. And basically the water can't get out. It slowly, laterally seeps out, I think, towards the south and southeast, towards the wetland replication area. The watershed for wetland A, and I looked at the previous contours and the existing contours, is about 1.7 acres. Not a lot. It's really minimal. And I don't think that it really contributes a lot of water to this area. It obviously contributes some. I think what's going on here, and of course that situation will continue. We're not altering the grading at this point. What was there before in pre-existing conditions before the fill is now pretty much the same. So that water will get here to the extent that it did before. I think what's going on here is you have a situation where there's a combination of the fact that you don't have a lot of trees evapotranspirating here, and that's a concern. I'll explain that in a moment. And you have a very dense layer, and that there's basically those layers beneath during the test pits, and all the test pits that I did were basically bone dry. There was absolutely no moisture. So you have basically a bathtub. And you have a slightly depressional area, so you collect water through precipitation, and the water stays there for a prolonged period of time, enough to provide for proper hydrology for the wetland vegetation and the wetland hydrology, which doesn't last, probably past the spring season. So this is sort of a situation. I remember being out there in early July, and as I said in my report, I wasn't getting any indication of water any closer to the surface than 12 inches. And in some cases, even further down than that. But in the central portion, certainly I had some moisture down below 12 inches, but not above that. And I remember pretty distinctly that. So I think what happens here is that we have the benefit that we don't have a lot of trees evapotranspirating yet. We have this bathtub effect. We have sort of the depressional area and enough water for a prolonged enough period during the spring season to create wetland hydrology. So that's exactly what would happen in the situation for this replication area. We would have to rely to some extent to the watershed, but for the most part, whatever falls here and stays here and can get out, and the only way it can get out is through evapotranspiration. Now, if the beavers had not done what the beavers did here, which is to keep felling the, and you saw the picture that I had from my previous report, which was just amazing to me, going out there and seeing all these little spikes all over the place and going, what's going on here? And, you know, you've got to be careful not fall on one. But they basically take these cottonwoods, and cottonwoods, as you probably know, grow very fast, and they can have a luxurious canopy and very large leaves. So they can evapotranspirate quite quickly. So the beavers have done us a favor in kind of keeping this wetland to its extent. If the cottonwoods grew and other trees grew, you're going to start shrinking this wetland from a hydrological point of view, where you're not going to have wetland vegetation. You're going to have upland take over, except maybe right in the middle where it's more depressional. So having said that, my plan would be, well, there's a couple of things that are going through my mind. Certainly, one thing that's for sure is we're not planting any trees, except maybe on this portion that I just discussed before, where we're taking out some invasives, and some shading there might not be a bad thing anyhow. So I'm looking at something that's a wet meadow, a marsh fringe, and shrubs, and not to go too heavy with shrubs. And then the question will become, well, how do we maintain this? Because if we just let it go, unfortunately, I can tell you that a wetland A will shrink over time. And I've seen that happen before. I've seen it several times, and particularly in some sort of sand and gravel pits that you go 1 year and it looks pretty darn wet, and you come back another 10 or 15 years later, do some more work, and the wetlands have shrunk because there's tons of trees that are evapotranspirating. So this is kind of the trajectory we're taking as far as the wetland replication. And of course, there are some profiles that you can look at that we've put down. Now, the other issue, obviously, is the wetland restoration. If we can kind of pull that down a little bit, we could discuss that. One of the things we did, remember, one of the major items of discussion was I had said that I did not want any slopes to be steeper than 3 to 1 within the demarcation buffer that's designated as 25 feet at this point. And the reason was that, you know, anything steeper than that has a problem with stabilization. Potentially, you'd have to use other means to stabilize it. So we went out and we did some topography, and then we have these profiles that we've generated. And if we can go to the profiles, can you turn that sideways possibly? Okay, everyone turn their head to the left.
Yeah, let me see what I can.
I forgot to.
I'm looking. I can't. Yeah.
Well, if you can't, don't worry about it.
Yeah, I don't think I can once I'm in the screen sharing mode.
Yeah, it kind of limits.
Oh,
what you-
here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go.
Beautiful.
There we go.
Thank
There we go.
Okay. All right. I'm not going to have a crick in my neck when I go to bed. So starting in the west, A, B, C, D, E, and F, you can see the 25-foot demarcation buffer limit. And you can see the top of the slope, the existing grade, and the proposed grade. And so you can see for there, you got a 6-to-1. The steepest one is the second one, which is right here. That's 4.5-to-1, and everything from then on becomes more and more gradual, where you can see that in some cases, like in these profiles, we don't have to, I mean, we don't even reach the 25-foot demarcation buffer. It's further away. So we could potentially get even slopes that are even more gentle within that 25 feet. So that's kind of now, I know and Ed will, I'll let him speak for himself. And I know that Ed obviously thinks, and I can understand that, you know, the gentler the slope, the less the risk that these things will slag or erode, as we've seen it happen out there already with these gullies that are formed. But if we're intentional in what we're doing here, we can certainly stabilize even a 3-to-1 slope, certainly ones that are more gentler. We can have specific mid-slope erosion sedimentation controls if we needed to. I guess what I said in my report, which is true, and I just experienced this just the other day doing some wetland inventory. There are wetlands out there with stable slopes that are 3-to-1 or worse, and right up against a natural wetland. So that's not an unusual situation. And if we're intentional in what we do, we can certainly stabilize those. Now, one thing that it doesn't show here, and that might kind of complicate things a little bit, is that you can see within the limit of restoration, say, let's look at F, which is right in the middle there. We see that from the edge of the wetland, the existing wetland, we have a 2% slope, and that's going to be the average slope. There will be slightly depressional because, as you recall, one of the things that we mentioned in the field and also in previous times is that we probably would have to go a little deeper than was there on the pre-existing condition, because the pre-existing condition had 2 layers. It had a top little layer that was somewhat restrictive, which was where the old roadbed was, and then below that we had the red stuff that we've seen everywhere else. So we would have to dip a little bit into that, so that area that we're restoring will be more depressional than it was before, so that we can ensure that there's a proper amount of hydrology. So that's kind of quickly going through what we've done to this point, and I'm more than happy to open it to any questions, or maybe have Ed comment on what he's seen so far.
Mr. Chair, we do have Ed Pollack on the call this evening with us if you would like to hear from him.
I would. I see his smiling face in the bottom of my screen.
Okay, we want to go to Ed now and then do questions. Okay.
Yep.
All right, Ed, go.
Okay. Good evening, commissioners, colleagues. I've not yet received full-scale copy of the restoration mitigation plan that is on the screen right now. I simply printed out, you know, on 8.5 by 11 paper the plan, and then the profiles that we were just looking at. And it's very difficult if not impossible, really, to interpret this grading plan, on an 8.5 by 11 sheet. I need to be able to look at the full-size plan in order to really get a better understanding of what the existing grade is, where the restoration is now proposed, which is now on the east side of the wetland. So, my comments right now really are preliminary, and quite honestly, they're limited by the fact that, I've not received the full scale plan, but I do understand that it's in the mail, and I will have a chance, hopefully very soon, to take a look at that. But nonetheless, I can offer some comments to you on the narrative of the restoration plan. I found the test pit data on page 2 of Mr. Logan's report quite instructive. It was helpful. Here he documents the soil conditions at depth in those 2 test pits that were dug. And what I noticed right away was the note below each of those test pit descriptions was that in each of those pits, water was observed seeping in at 15 inches. So you did have a perched water table. We can assume that means that you had a perched water table at 15 inches. And as Mr. Logan stated, it appears that that perched water table is sitting on top of very firm or extremely firm compact soils. So that's encouraging for a proposed wetland creation area. If you have a confirmed perched water table in that area, then through an excavation and proper grading, it's reasonable to assume that you'll be excavating into and exposing that seasonal perched water table. And as Mr. Logan pointed out, there was no evidence of that on the west side of Wetland A. So that was encouraging to observe that the documentation of that hydrology, subsurface hydrology at those 2 test pits. Mr. Logan did note that within the wetland A itself, that restrictive layer occurs at a variable depth, but in 3 of those test holes, it's between 1/2 and about 1.5 feet below the surface. So, we consider that a pretty shallow perched water table. It's not, you don't have to do it, wouldn't have to do a deep excavation to expose that. I would like to request that the mitigation plan includes some topography within Wetland A, the eastern end of Wetland A, which is adjacent to the proposed mitigation area. I really would like to see how the proposed grading within that mitigation area compares to the adjacent topography in Wetland A. I'd like to know, will there be a continuous slope from existing Wetland A eastern edge down into the depression that's proposed for construction? Can we expect surface water to move from Wetland A towards the mitigation area? And you can only determine that if you have topography at that eastern end of Wetland A to see what the surface hydrologic relationship is between the boundary, the edge of that wetland, and then the proposed mitigation area. So I request that be included. On page, let's see, this is page number 3, Mr. Logan writes that the hydrology of Wetland A does not depend to great extent on the contributing watershed, but on direct precipitation. But quite honestly, you know, there's a lot of educated guesswork involved at this point, because we just don't have the detailed subsurface studies that have been done. So at this point, we don't know for sure what is driving the hydrology of wetland day, but I'm considering the amount of water that I saw being retained within the center of that wetland. It certainly looks to me like it's more than just direct precipitation. And in fact, you can see how water is directed into that wetland. It's captured in a ditch at the edge of the fill that was placed along the northern boundary of wetland A. And then that ditch conveys that surface water into wetland A, into the interior. So I think I think the hydrology of wetland A certainly depends upon direct precipitation, but I don't think you should underestimate the contribution of surface water coming into that wetland from runoff. And similarly, I think the mitigation area would benefit from surface water that is entering it. It may be that Mr. Logan and I will have to agree to disagree on whether trees should be included in the mitigation area. While trees, well, it's true that the trees during the growing season pump water out of the ground from the roots up into the leaves through the process known as evapotranspiration. At the same time, the trees, eventually a tree canopy, provides a shade. It shades the soil surface of the wetland, and that shading reduces the soil temperature, and it reduces the evaporation rate coming at that soil surface. So trees really can do both. They will increase the amount of water removed from the soil in a wetland, but on the other hand, they will also, by shading, they will be decreasing the evaporation, so they'll be slowing the removal of water from the wetland. And I just don't think we have enough information to know that, or to state with confidence that trees are deleterious to the hydrology of wetland A or to the proposed mitigation area.
Artificial trees in.
And for habitat,
They'll suck up the water.
sorry, I think somebody's talking.
Sorry.
For the sake of a more diverse habitat within the mitigation area, I would like to see trees included in the planting plan. I just don't see enough evidence beyond really speculation that trees are deleterious to the hydrology of wetland A, or that they would be to the hydrology of the mitigation area. So, there are lots and lots of wetlands in Connecticut, forested wetlands, in which trees are removing water, but they're also shading. So, it's I think for habitat they should be included. So I will be providing more feedback once I see the large-scale plan. And with regard to the, that feedback, by the way, will include comments on the restored upland review area. What I would say is that I would like the restoration plan to include the restoration of the entire upland review area. Is that a 125-foot zone beyond the edge of the wetland? That entire area, regulated area, upland review area, should be revegetated and fully vegetated, should be restored. So that I recommend that be included as part of the plan. And additionally, I would like to see the boundary of that upland review area, as well as the boundary of wetland A and the mitigation area, demarcated permanently with something like wooden posts and medallions to minimize the chance that in the future, filling of regulated areas would be done without knowledge. I would like to propose as well that the filling of wetland B to the west of wetland A, that be delayed until it's demonstrated that the two sumps within the proposed mitigation area actually are functioning as amphibian breeding habitat. Based upon observations of several observers last spring, wetland B was being utilized by at least one or more species of amphibians. So before that amphibian breeding habitat is eliminated, I recommend that the commission receive evidence that that habitat has been recreated within the sumps in the mitigation area. Once that's been established, then I think it's appropriate to eliminate wetland B. And finally, I'd like to suggest that the commission request that the applicant provide a proposed spring amphibian survey, the details of that survey, that breeding season is very close upon us. And I recommend that survey be done through the spring within wetland A, wetland B, and if you'll recall, there are two lobes of wetland B. One was delineated, that's a northern lobe. The southern lobe was not, but it contains seasonal flooding as well. So both lobes of wetland B should be surveyed for amphibians, and as well at least to date, undelineated ponded area to the west of wetland B, which may be utilized by amphibians as well. So with the amphibian spring breeding season coming up quite quickly, I suggest that the commission request that information. And that's what I have now. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Shannon, could I possibly give a little more information now that I've heard Ed that might be helpful? Or actually, I should ask Bob. Sorry.
Well, that's the chairman's discretion.
That's fine, George. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think Ed is right. If he gets the full-size plan, that certainly will be very helpful. One thing that I did not mention, and I should have, if we can go back to the plan.
The site plan?
Yeah, that is.
Yeah.
So I would say that, and I don't have a line on here, but I would say that all of the area where you see the profiles that go through the replication area, yeah, all the area where the additional test holes in the area were done, all that was we did new topography there. So that's the current topography. Again, it's so flat that it's very difficult to see the changes, but we could, I suppose, if Ed wanted, even though it gets a little complicated, is to turn on additional contours that give them, half-foot increments, which is kind of more or less what we did in the wetland replication area. Those are not 1 foot contours. We did that so we could do the profiles and make a little more sense. But yeah, we did new topography in there, so that's that should be helpful. And I think Ed's point is well taken, is that what we want to be showing is that there is a transition from wetland A to the replication area that's not deleterious to wetland A, but at the same time improves conditions or helps with the replication area. I think the water is moving that way, both on the surface, but certainly subsurface based on what I saw. So that was one thing that might be helpful. On the URA, on the upland review area, Ed said restoring the upland review area. Yeah, I think that's the plan, and that's a report that we had put back some time ago that we were going to do some specialized seeding out in those areas, and also, continue on the removal of invasives like we did the previous season. So that's certainly something that we will show and point out. Unfortunately, I can't share, but if I did, I would show you the watershed, but I'll do that with the next iteration to show where the watershed for wetland A was and is. And I didn't mean to say that the watershed's not important. It is important. But I think precipitation is a big factor here. And then the last thing that I would say, and Ed could, I guess, I don't want to disagree with Ed. I mean, he's a good colleague. I know we'll have a little different opinion on the trees, but I would say this, that if you compare evaporation from a surface of water to transpiration, you can have up to an order of magnitude difference, where transpiration is a lot more heavily taking water out of the system than evaporation does. But I could supply some numbers on that. They're readily available. That's all I have to say to supplement. Thank you.
Thanks, George. So I guess right now it's up to some of the commissioners whether you have any questions. You're just trying to absorb all the information that came in, or what? So Rich, we'll start with you.
I don't have any questions at this point. But that's all I have.
Okay. Emily?
I have no questions.
All right. Dave?
No questions from me either.
Robert?
Just a timing question. Ed, once you receive the full engineered plans, do you have a tentative time frame on what your turnaround will be? Will you have a written report for the commission prior to our next meeting?
Next meeting is April 7th for reference.
Thank you, Shannon.
Yes, I can have something for you in writing for the next meeting.
And I'm not compelling you to do that. It's, we need you to take the time that you need. I'm just trying to sort out what the next steps will be. So that's helpful. I'll leave that to you and Shannon to work out.
Okay.
That's all I have tonight. Thank you.
Is that it, Robert?
Yes.
Okay. Mark?
I don't have any questions. I do have a comment about one thing that Ed said about the wetland B. That is, I don't feel it should be removed until we know the wetlands, the other areas being reverted back to wetlands are active and supporting of aquatic life. So I agree with them totally on that piece. That's it.
Okay, thanks. Ned?
Where's Ned?
Ned?
Damn mute button. On the plan view, there's 25-foot demarcation buffer limit, and I wanted to get Ed's opinion if he thought that was sufficient for amount of buffer.
That's a good question. I think we've talked about this point at prior meetings. Because at this point there is no proposal in front of you for the area to the north of wetland A. It's impossible to know how much of a vegetated upland zone, i.e. buffer, would be required to protect wetland A from impacts associated with that at this point, just hypothetical development. So it's only, once if a development proposal comes forward in the future, and you look at the nature of that proposal, then you could say, okay, well, how much buffer is necessary to protect wetland A from that, the impacts of that development from urban runoff and so on. So it's almost really premature to even refer to a buffer zone, north of wetland A, and how wide it should be for that reason. What I'm looking for, and what I think the commission should ask for, is the full vegetated restoration of that regulated upland area, the upland review area associated with wetland A. I think it should be restored, as I've said previously, it should be restored at a gentle grade so that stormwater runoff runs across it gently. And that would be particularly important if at some future date that area is developed and stormwater runoff is going to be flowing from a development towards that wetland. You would want it to be flowing across a very gently sloping vegetated buffer. And so if you commit yourself to a steeper buffer to include 3-to-1 slopes, well, it would just hasten the movement of water across that upland zone. The slower the water moves, the better the renovation can be. So, I've got one eye towards the future of if there is eventually a road, anything, some kind of a development there with stormwater runoff coming towards a wetland A. I want that to be flowing across a gentle gradient, not across, a steeper slope where it'll have less opportunity for filtration. So given all of that, I treat that entire upland review area really as the same at this point. It doesn't have a buffering function in the sense that there's no development, land use to the north that's generating any kind of polluted runoff. So eventually, though, if there is something proposed there, then you would need to talk about, okay, how much buffer is necessary to preserve there. At this point, it's most important to restore that upland review area, remove the invasives that have come in since the fill was placed there, and restore that at a gentle grade so that water moves slowly across it. Those are the key points that I keep emphasizing with regard to that upland area.
Okay, thank you.
That it, Ned?
That's it for me.
Okay, Jay?
I don't have any questions.
Okay, I do have a couple of questions. George, the distance between wetland A and wetland B, approximately, what is that?
The distance between wetland A and wetland B?
Yeah, just an approximate distance.
That doesn't, I don't think it shows on here. I don't know. George, are you still on the line?
Well, I see his face.
Yeah, I'm here and I'm thinking, we don't have it right here. It's off the side of the plan, obviously. So I would say it's probably 350 feet.
Okay, no, and that's fine. I mean, because where I'm kind of going with this is, like in reading something from the Army Corps, it sounds like the Army Corps is looking at, vernal pool areas where a lot of the critters that utilize the vernal pools tend to come more from sort of forested areas, if you will. So I'm assuming that because there is more tree cover, things of that nature around wetland A than wetland B, that A might theoretically be the more important one to save. I mean, is that a reasonable approach on this?
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable approach. And plus, this, when you you know, set aside the issue with, you know, hydrology and how this is going to be done in the final plan. I think embedding potential amphibian habitat next to another wetland obviously increases its ecological integrity than where it is right now, where we're looking at something that was recently created in wetland B, in the northern lobe, as we're calling it. So yeah, I think this is a much better situation because it's going to be surrounded by either wetlands or uplands that will be preserved.
Yeah, because again, I'm looking at that 750-foot envelope for the vernal pools. That's kind of where I'm thinking.
Yeah, true. But again, we don't know, you know, I'd be very surprised if we have obligate species here. It doesn't mean they someday won't come, but
yeah.
You know, there has been a lot of disturbance here over the years. So, and I can't see any corridors that might bring these species from other places, but
okay.
Again, we won't know until we go out and look, I guess.
Yeah. And okay, then I kind of agree with Mark about holding off on getting rid of wetland B until we've got a better idea of what's going on with wetland A. And then my last question to you, George, may have just been sort of a slip of the tongue, but what do you mean if Ed gets the full-size plans?
Well,
that's how you start, is if Ed gets the full-size plan. So
well, I guess
Ed's going to get the full-size plans, right?
he will. Yes, absolutely.
No, they were sent from this office.
Okay.
So there are two sets of these drawings along with the a colored copy of George's report were sent from this office.
Okay.
I've been accused of the slip of a tongue very often, so don't worry about it.
I just wondered if you knew something I didn't, that's all.
No.
Okay, I mean, I don't have any other questions.
The Commissioner Eisner has a question.
Okay, that's fine.
Whatever. Somebody has a question, their hand's raised.
Yeah, please don't make me chair, Bob's doing a great job. I did have a question. Thanks, Shannon, for catching that. And it's in regard to the comment that Ed Pollock had made about suggesting another amphibian survey this spring because the time is ripe. So I just wanted to see if that's something that Stanley and George would be able to respond back to. Is that something they'd be willing to do for the current
Certainly.
spring?
I mean, it does help that we have 3 weeks between now and the next meeting. And with a warming trend, certainly I'll be out there in the next couple of weeks. And so I'll be able to report back.
I think that would be very useful. Thank you.
Yes.
I agree with you.
Okay, can we discuss the frequency of how do we want it checked in on once a week? We want it checked in on once between now and the next meeting. I don't want to get caught in semantics after the fact. So if we can get a consensus as to frequency, I think the areas where wetland A, wetland B, north and south, and the pond area to the west. So I think the locations are clear, but if we could get a consistency on the frequency, I'd appreciate it, please.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, could I suggest maybe that George provide what he thinks would be appropriate and then maybe get some feedback from Ed?
Okay.
You mean frequency as far as monitoring for potential amphibian activity?
Correct.
Okay, so as Ed knows, we're all kind of have our ears glued to other colleagues right now to hear who has heard amphibians. I've already heard peepers. We already have wood frogs that are doing their mating thing down in Fairfield County. So things are starting to move. So I'm going to say that, and of course I got my little vernal pool in the backyard here that I'm checking out. So I would say that once we get this warming trend, we'll do the first time and then probably a week later to see if there's been any change. So I can guarantee you there will be 2 looks between now and me reporting to the commission on April 7th at a minimum. But I think that's probably going to be sufficient to see if there's anything going on. Typically, the period that you want to look at once you start, when the activity starts, which could be any time, right, in March. Sometimes it's the 2nd week of March, sometimes the 3rd. And then depending on weather patterns, usually by the time mid-April rolls around, you're done. But there've been interesting years where you think you're done and then a week later you got another pulse. So again, it's fluid. We're going to have to look and make up a decision.
If I may, Ed Pollack, I agree with George with respect to the obligates, the early season breeding obligates like wood frog and the ambystoma mole salamanders like the spotted salamander. But I believe that, if I remember correctly, I believe there were reports that the American toad was breeding in wetland B last year. There were observations of amphibian American toad larvae. If that's the case, then you wouldn't pick them up at the beginning of the breeding season. They don't, as I recall, they don't get going really until into April. So the monitoring should continue through at least, I would recommend, through at least the point where you would expect to pick up American toads. And if they were there last year, you'd expect them to be there again this year. And I would agree, weekly monitoring would be great. No more than that, no more frequent than that is necessary. At the same time as observing and surveying and sampling for amphibian, different life stages, I'd also recommend measuring maximum water depth at each of those, in each of those wetlands to as part of the information, hydrologic information that's provided on those wetlands.
Agreed. I mean, and by the way, toads, depending on the year and depending on the exposure to sunlight, they might actually be a good overlap with other amphibians. So, April, certainly, by April, toads will start moving.
Okay. And George, do you mind just for one of those, probably not the first one, but whatever, the last week of March or first week in April, give me a ring if you're heading out, and if I'm available, I'll join you out on the site. I certainly don't have any intention of being there weekly with you, but
bring your boot.
Part of it's just for my own edification too, just for seeing things. So.
Yep. No, that'd be fine. A pleasure to do that.
Thank you.
So are we at an end here for the evening on this one?
That's perhaps sounds that way, unless any commission member has any other questions.
No, but I am glad to see some progress being made. So for that, I am thankful and appreciate the work that people are putting in.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you,
you.
George. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Stanley and Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, folks. Good night.
Good night.
Night.
Okay.
Okay.
Here we go.
There's some business we need to take care of tonight on this. For one, going back to the minutes of December 2nd, where the commission voted to make the determination that 402 Farmington Avenue LLC application for regulated activity within upland review area consisting of proposed driveway, parking lot, garage building, associated grading, clearing, and stormwater management basins associated with multifamily development at lots 40 and 40B1 Farmington Avenue are significant in nature and require a public hearing. And my take on that is that the issue was this was a significant size project and therefore could have an impact on the wetlands, which is why we ended up requesting the hearing in the first place. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, because I don't think that we had definitely said there would definitely be a significant activity or a significant impact on the wetlands, but it was just to make sure that what was planned and as it progressed, we had the hearing so people could provide input, we could ask questions and go on from there. So I think that's kind of where we were when we made that original determination to have the hearing. It wasn't that there was specifically a significant activity there, but it was a big project and we needed to make sure. So am I wrong on that, or is that pretty much what people remember?
Mr. Chairman, this is Ned. That's the way I remember. It was mostly about the size of the project. It was significant amount of work, a lot of construction activity going on, but it wasn't definite to me that there would be that at that time that we agreed that there would be an effect on the wetland areas.
That sounds about right to me as well.
Yeah, Robert,
Me as well. This is Dave. In fact, I think I said not significant the first time through, but then when a couple of the commissioners pointed out the size of the project, I was swayed in the other direction.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think I was one of, this is Robert Eisner. I think I was one of the commissioners that may have led that discussion, but you are correct, Mr. Chairman. The perspective was it was a significant project with the possibility of impacts erring on the side of caution, moving it to a hearing. That was the background and the basis for doing the hearing.
I remember it the same, just for the record.
Yeah, I mean, so basically, sort of what we need to do is one, I mean, by definition, I don't think there's any question that this is a regulated activity because there's work within the 150-foot upland review area. But I think we need to go back and take a look at a couple of specific things. One is, I want to just sort of quickly go over the definition of significant impact and what it means to see whether or not what is being proposed falls under that category. But also, because if, I forget, I think it's, what is it, Article 6, Section D, I think it's on page W12. If the commission finds, based on the information before it, that the proposal will involve a significant activity or activity described below, the applicant shall be required to submit such pertinent information as set forth in Section 6E, which is in essence getting into the prudent and feasible alternative. So the question is whether or not there was a significant activity associated with this proposed project, given the set of facts that we're currently working with. So what I want to do is just sort of hit the issues associated with the definition of significant impact to see whether anything fits there, and then look at to see whether or not the project falls under a significant activity. If people feel, well, actually, whether you feel it does or it doesn't, we need to have, I think, a formal motion on it. But again, I'm looking at this from the perspective that, and actually looking at the maps, it's really a very small portion of the site overall development that is within the 150-foot setback. And as far as I remember, there's no direct impact on any of the wetlands. So that's kind of where I'm coming from on it. But I guess we'll just bring them up one at a time. So Shannon, I don't know if you've got, I think you had the regulations at one point in time up, but
I can.
if you can find page W5 on the in the regs.
I will. Sorry, my brain's working on super slow. Hang on a second here.
At least yours is working.
And Bob, while Shannon's pulling up the regs, I concur with the course of action. I think it's appropriate to go back and revisit the foundation and whether or not there was a significant activity. I concur.
Yeah, because I think we need it for the record, because again, if there is a significant activity, then there are other issues that we have to deal with. And if we don't feel as though it's a significant activity, that's, you know, it takes a different approach. But here, the first one in A, any activity involving deposition or removal of material which will or may have a substantial effect on the wetland or water course or on wetlands or water courses outside the area for which the activity is proposed. I mean, I don't see it for this project. I really don't. There's no direct impact on the wetlands. And for the most part, the activity that is being proposed inside the 150-foot area is the detention basins. So I don't know how other people feel about this one, but just, you know, again, I'm just trying to get an idea as to how people feel as to whether or not this does have a significant impact.
I'm with you on this, Bob. Do we want to do just a preliminary poll to see if this is a thing we need to discuss, or?
Well, I think we need to do this because it will have an impact on any decision that we make.
So I need to interject, and I apologize for having to do this, but we are, because the hearing is closed, at this point in time, the discussion needs to take place with the voting members. So the alternates cannot participate at this point in time. I'm sorry to have to do that.
No, Shannon told me, but my brain is tired too.
No, and
I forgot.
Unfortunately, we have to be very strict with
with
that, so I apologize.
I mean, I guess the big question is, I don't know if people have actually gone through these particular categories. I mean, there's 7 of them. And I mean, I'll deal with all 7 at one time. I just don't see it. Because of what's being proposed, being outside the wetland area. I mean, there is no water course there, so that eliminates the things. I know one of the issues that was brought up during the conversation is it could impact subsurface drainage, but then again, that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with us because wetlands is based on soil condition, not what may happen with water permeating through rock and whether there's additional calcium or whatever kind of materials it may dissolve and bring to a given area. I mean, that's not under our jurisdiction. So,
Yeah, and Bob, I also think it's important just to make sure we're all on the same page for the discussion that for the assessment of significant impact, there is a difference between the wetland and water course itself and the upland review area, that the significant impact is talking to the specific wetland and water course areas, not the buffer area.
Bob, this is Jay. Can I make sure I understand what you're doing right now?
Yes.
I just want to make sure I'm clear. You're suggesting that we go back and revisit and maybe rethink the initial determination?
No, I'm not. No, it's not to go back and do that. I think the reason that we made the original decision to have the public hearing was because of the size and scope of the project. And it was very close to some vernal pools. It was close to wetlands. And I think because of the size of the project, that's why we opted to hold the hearing. What I'm trying to do now is get a feel for commission members as to whether or not they think this activity creates a significant impact or it is a significant activity. So again, I think some of these things don't necessarily fit because, I mean, for example, B is any activity which substantially changes the natural channel or may inhibit the natural dynamics of a water course system. It's not applicable here because there is no water course. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do is just get a feel to see where people stand on these 7 components, at least for significant impact. And then I want to take a look at significant activity because part of this deals with our decision-making process, and that it states in regards to applications for a regulated activity in which a public hearing was held, a permit shall not be issued unless the commission finds on the basis of the record that a feasible and prudent alternative does not exist. Now, if there is no significant activity, we don't need to worry about the feasible and prudent alternative. So I'm just trying to make sure where people are with this activity as it relates to a significant activity.
This is Ned. One of the things that influenced me the most on this is those pipes that go under the roadway, and the fact that the invert elevation of the pipes is, significantly higher than the normal elevation of the vernal pools. And I think that does a lot to keep water from the two sediment basins that are being set up from getting back into the vernal pools. And I think that offers a level of protection that to the vernal pools that isn't would make it not to a condition not to create a significant activity here. And just generally speaking on this, I started trying to think about the area and the project, and I looked at the traffic count on Route 4, which is 700 feet from this project. The vehicles, it's 22,000 vehicles per day. I just in generally speaking as to how this project is to be viewed, it's I don't think it's totally out of line for the character of this area, and in regards to, I know we're not really about, that's more planning and zoning, but I think in regards to the vernal pools, and it's that I don't think this project is going to have a big effect on the water course there, or the vernal pool there. That's my 2 cents.
So Ned, Mr. Chairman, I think we should probably do what you were doing. That's, sort of a strict interpretation on the 7 criteria of the definition of significant impact, whether we think it is or is not. So I think Ned, I think I heard what you were saying, but you probably need to weigh in as to whether, translate that into, what we're seeing on the screen. Is it a significant impact?
I do not think it is a significant impact. And I think it has to do with the way the pipes are situated there, that it offers a level of protection between the project and the vernal pools.
Yeah, and part of the reason I'm bringing some of this up is because some of the criteria here were never an issue with this particular project because, like there's no water course on the property. There are wetlands to the south and there are wetlands to the north and I guess a little bit to the east, but there's no water course. So some of these things do not apply because there's no water course. So that's kind of where I was coming on some of it. Like with B, any activity which would substantially change the natural channel or may inhibit the natural dynamics of a water course system. It's not applicable here because it doesn't exist. I mean, do people at least agree with that one?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree. And Mr. Chairman, I've read through this and I appreciate Shannon pulling together all the background information prior to the meeting. In my conclusion is that the proposed project does not represent a significant activity based on these 7 criteria.
Well, these are for significant impact. There's a different set of criteria for significant activity.
Correct. It's getting late. I meant to say significant impact.
I know, believe me, I've had problems with this all day long. But again, where I'm trying to go with this is I'm hoping that we can at least come to a decision on whether or not this is a significant activity so that we can then get to the next step, whatever that is. But I mean, in terms of rendering a decision, things of that nature, or at least allowing Shannon to go ahead and start doing some work to get to that point. I mean, if it's easier for people to just take a quick look at these things and we can just discuss, just do A, what do people think? B, what do people think? C? I mean,
Well,
my take is,
I
I
don't
don't
know.
think any of these things are applicable here.
I don't know, Bob, is Mark. I think, if we go through these, we're going to come to the same conclusion. When you say significant, I think anytime we're doing wetlands that include vernal pools, that is why I think it's significant. I think that is why we decided to have a public hearing, but I don't think the project is going to create a significant impact to those wetlands and vernal pools. So the only thing significant here is the fact we're dealing with vernal pools, not that the project itself will have a significant impact on those vernal pools.
So
That's
Dave,
all.
you want to chime in? Dave still here?
I'm here. Oh, so, and I don't know if I'm being nitpicky or not, but I'm looking at. I've really tried to understand and comprehend how we go about making the decision, and I've actually asked for clarification a couple of times. And Attorney DiCrescenzo actually, addressed my question.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at the word significant, and I don't know if we're at this point yet, but a significant potential for impact to wetlands is insufficient. So I'm not sure that the word significant is the right word to use. Adverse impact, and maybe I'm being nitpicky, but the significant activity isn't necessarily, or saying it's not a significant activity, I'm not sure leads us to the conclusion that you're kind of leading to. And maybe I'm putting I don't mean to put words in your mouth, and maybe my brain is kind of tired too, but I'm catching that word significant, and
Well, that's what it all hinges on, that word.
Yeah, I think I can add some clarification to this. So the memo that we got from Attorney DiCrescenzo pertained to the evaluation of the intervenor petitions and the claims that they were making.
Yeah, that's the point.
And so the claim that they made that they claimed there would be a significant adverse impact to the wetland. That claim had to be substantiated and quantified. Like, say they were, for example, there was 300 square feet of direct fill in one of the wetlands or in a vernal pool. That's specific, quantifiable. So terms like significant, adverse could not be used, or is not what we were looking for that direction at that time. We've moved past that. So now we're back to, again, the commission had made the determination in December that the project was significant and warranted a hearing. And so now the very first step, as Bob's explained, needs to determine based on the regulations and now your broader understanding of the project because of the public hearing and the additional information that all parties imparted to you. Based on that, using this definition, because this is what we have for our regulations, is this a significant impact? And then Bob's correct, we'll move to a page 2 here. It's actually down on page 12, but a second page up on the screen to take a look and say, okay, there's another set of 6 or 7 criteria. And if you folks need to make the determination based on this expanded understanding of the project, because you chose to have a hearing, now based on this information, is this project going to have a significant impact on the wetland, the resources, the environment, the wetland vernal pool resources that have been identified? And that matters because it triggers whether or not, if you say no, that it's not then okay, that discussion's kind of finished and pushed aside. If you say yes, then it triggers a discussion regarding feasible and prudent alternatives. So that's why we have to kind of go through this in some type of systematic way. Does that, hopefully that's helpful.
It does. I'm looking, I have the language, part of the language in front of there, and in front of me, and it talks about the commission's decision to deny a permit based on substantial basis and adverse impact, and significant isn't in that language. So I guess I was thinking that this whole set of paragraphs that I've been looking at were part of the decision-making of the permit of the applicant and beyond the scope of the intervenor petitions, but I guess I'm wrong.
We're specifically reviewing the definition of significant impact. And if you're just on your phone, you're at a disadvantage because you can't see what we have on the screen, which is pages W5 and W6 of the regs.
I'll shut up now. I'm not that I have to shut up, but I guess maybe I'm off. Maybe I'm a little off base. And I get where you're going. When I heard significant activity, that was why I asked you the question at the very beginning, Bob, if we were revisiting the initial thing, the initial decision that we made.
We made a decision to call a public hearing because the project was considered significant, but now we need to make a determination as to whether or not this project will have, whether it's a significant impact or if it is a significant activity associated with the wetlands.
Okay.
Because we had the hearing. We can't go back and change that. So that happened. And there are other parts of the regulations that say if you had a hearing, A, B, C, and D. So I'm just trying to deal with whether or not people think this project will create a significant impact or it is a significant activity.
Okay.
And Bob, what I've heard so far is Mark, Ned, you and me have all weighed in that, the factors in the definition 25A through 25G are not applicable. It's not a significant impact. Is that correct?
That's my take.
That's my feeling.
Dave, did you?
I would agree too.
This is Dave. I would agree that it doesn't meet the definitions of significant impact. I think the fact that there's no direct impact to the wetlands rules out probably A, B, and C. D, E, and F, I looked at as what stormwater from the outside of the wetlands might do to impact the wetlands. But I think that the stormwater collection system has a lot of elements that will treat the water quality, so as not to cause pollution of the wetland. And also it mimics the actual flow of the existing site as was described by the applicant, so that it's not going to result in a diminution of the flow or the groundwater levels of the wetland. So D, E, and F are okay. And again, G, the wetland is being avoided, so it's not going to do that. So I would agree that it's not a significant impact.
Okay, so the take I'm getting on this is that one, we do not feel as though the application as submitted and presented, this would be a significant impact on the wetlands.
Just to again put in my 2 cents, and I'm not nitpicking this time. As you can tell, I've struggled with this and agonized over this, probably like we all have, because there's been so much to absorb here. But ultimately, I agree with what everyone else is saying. Just for the record.
Thank you. So then, moving to page W12, which I think is the next spot. Because on this identifies the criteria dealing with a significant activity. And it's A, B, C, and D here, and it goes through H on the next page. Yeah, I mean, you probably don't need Yeah, that's probably pretty good because again, a significant activity includes that which will have a significant impact or an activity which may cause. And again, I mean, I'll go on this. I mean, I've looked at these things and the only one that I had some difficulty with in coming up with an answer was G, which is a conflict with the plan of conservation and development or open space plan, which may result in incompatible uses, loss of amenities. But again, I've never known the plan of development to be a grounds for even denying something like with planning and zoning. This is a fluid document. It changes. I think what we have to supposed to do them every 10 years. I think so. It's something that's going to change over time with the town. It's sort of a roadmap of where they think they might like to be, but it's not like our regulations. So, I mean, that was the one I had some trouble with, but even with that, nobody ever formally submitted a copy of the plan of conservation and development to the, with the application. I think, was it attorney, was it Shiensky? Had discussed it. But that was the only one that I had fitting in with the general category. But again, that's more going to be, to me, a zoning issue because there's a zoning change that's proposed and some of the other issues that were raised by people are more applicable to planning and zoning than they were to us because they're outside of our jurisdiction. So that's kind of where I was coming from on these. Like you look at B, decrease the minimum flow of a water course. There's no water course, so that's not applicable. C, the actual or potential pollution of an aquifer or water course. There's no aquifer there. There's no water course there. So to me, these are not applicable. So from my perspective, I do not believe that there is a significant activity that's associated with this project based on them starting off being outside the wetland area.
I would agree with you, Bob.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I concur that, after having the benefit of a lot of information that came through the public hearing process, the outcome, in my opinion, was that there was not information that showed there was a significant activity based on the criteria in 6D1A through H.
Dave?
I would agree. The one that caused me a little bit of thought was D, a reduction of the natural capacity to support biological life. Of course, that's the vernal pool and the wood frogs. There was a lot of testimony about the 750-foot buffer, and we would be impacting some of that. I think it was 11%. But the directional buffer that was offered to the south and the west, I would think that we don't know how much, if at all, the reduction will occur. So I think I could agree it's not a significant activity.
Mark, any comments?
No comments.
You agree? You disagree?
I'm agreeing.
Okay, Jay?
Yeah, I also had kind of put an asterisk next to D like Dave did, but if I understand what we're supposed to do with this, I don't think I can take this beyond the possibility, and that's not good enough. So I would say I agree with what you're saying, with the general consensus that it's not significant.
Okay, so then Shannon, my understanding on this is we need to take a formal vote. I mean, based on what I'm hearing, it sounds like it's a 6-0 position that the project does not result in a significant activity, right?
Correct. We do need a formal vote on this, please. Yes.
So would somebody care to make a motion to that effect?
Bob, I would move that after evaluating the full record and considering all of the information presented, the proposed project is not a significant activity that would have a significant impact on the wetlands and water courses based on the definition of those terms in our regulations.
Is there a second?
I'll second it, Ned.
Okay. Any comments, questions, corrections? Hearing nothing, those in favor of a motion saying this is not a significant activity, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstaining? So with that, Shannon, I'm going to ask that you go ahead and start working your magic to draft a resolution for our consideration for the next meeting,
Okay, will do.
so that we can get all the i's dotted, the t's crossed, the bold where we need bold, underline where we need underlined, whatever. So my take is, because of when the hearing ended, which concluded on the 3rd, we've got 35 days to render a decision.
Yes.
So that comes in at our next meeting, which is what do we say? April 7th?
7.
April
That's
7th.
30 days.
The thing that we basically said by the vote tonight was that people did not feel as though this was a significant activity. Therefore, it does not bring into play the prudent and feasible alternatives. So that is not a requirement. So that is part of the reason for having a formal vote on it. So we should be able to move forward on that. And I just want to thank everybody for their patience with me and their stamina to deal with these issues. I mean, it's been a long, arduous process, but we will be getting there. So, I mean, Shannon, if people have any questions, should they give you a call? I mean, the one thing that I would ask the people do is if there are specific things that you think need to be incorporated into a decision, whether it's an approval or a denial, is if you have some specific issues, get them to Shannon.
Mhm.
You know, that way it helps her trying to pull everything together and draft what she needs to draft for us.
One
Yeah,
thing
and
that,
Bob,
one thing
go
that
ahead,
came
Ned.
up, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead,
No,
Bob.
go ahead, Ned.
One thing that came up in the hearing and all the testimony from the attorneys is trying to convince us that our limit of review goes way past 150 feet that we've normally used.
Yep.
Now, I didn't agree with that, but, and the other part of me that started thinking about this is, well, if we did agree with that and started looking at something further out, well, what does that say about all the decisions we made over the last 5 years or whatever, you know, because we've done business with a 150-foot review, you know, rule. And then because somebody, you know, tried to convince us that we should be looking far beyond that, it seems like you're changing the rules midstream here. And I think it would cause us a lot of headaches to go ahead and change that profile, you know, that 150-foot line, upland review line. So I don't know if that is going to come into it, as to whether they wanted us to look at something further out.
Yes, they did.
Yeah, I know, but
my take would be that I think that's why some of the language came in the way that it did. It was to raise that as an issue. And again, our jurisdiction, our regulated activity is within 150 feet. It's the upland review area. And, you know, you start getting outside that area. My personal take is you're really starting to stretch your authority.
Yeah, and I would, you know, yeah, and Mr. Chairman, because I think there's a possibility that the entire proceeding could get transcribed and debated later on, we probably want to just narrow our focus of the conversation to the facts of, you know, let's not get too far into speculation and
No, but I mean, I'm going back specifically to a comment that Dr. Clemens made. And he said we should be looking at a half a mile north, south, east, and west of the property. That is a comment that Dr. Clemens made. It's on the record. So, but that I think is where Ned was going with this, you know.
Yeah, correct. I completely agree. Yep, I completely agree. Just as we heard the attorneys differing on matters of law, we heard the environmental professionals differing on their perspectives of the different facets of this case. So I think we've got a lot to mull over. I did want to put into the record, Bob, that Shannon, in drafting the proposed motion, the expectation by the commission is that you'll follow the normal course of action and incorporate the standard conditions that this commission usually includes. And I heard, Mr. Chairman, what you said, that if we have additional insight, we can let Shannon know, but I want the record to be clear that, you know, she's following our instruction in drafting what we would normally include for conditions to consider.
No, agreed. Thank you. So I think we're done with this one right now. That sound
Yes,
about
sir.
right, Shannon?
Yes, sir. And I think we'll monitor the agenda for April 7th. What I may do, and we'll be in touch. We're going to pop this at the top of the meeting for April 7th.
Yeah.
So, and everybody else can just deal with it and wait their turn. But we'll move this to the top on the 7th because I can.
Okay.
No, I think that makes sense overall, you know, with, you know, clear minds and not having toothpicks holding our eyelids open.
Exactly.
Planners report?
No.
I have something.
Nothing. Nothing other than what's already been on the table this evening.
What's the situation with the council about a replacement member?
I don't know, actually. I don't, all I know is that no action was taken on March 9th. That's to the best of my knowledge. I haven't received any paperwork indicating otherwise, and normally I would have had it within a few days.
Okay, no, I just thought I'd ask to see if you'd
Of
heard
course.
anything, that's all.
No.
Minutes? Can I get a motion to approve the minutes of March 3rd, 2021 Wetlands meeting?
This is Mark, so moved.
Is there a second?
Jay, second.
Any comments, corrections, questions? I have a question. Shannon didn't put my response text message in the minutes.
Uh-oh.
Your response, actually, that
Yes,
wasn't
you
in the
said I
minutes.
could come back.
Oh, no, I wasn't putting that in the minutes.
Okay.
I'm like, that portion was there though. Oh, goodness.
Okay. So those in favor of approving the minutes, vote aye.
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 Okay, so we'll quickly adjourn wetlands at 10:48. Start conservation at 10:48. New business, I guess, Land Acquisition Commission.
There
Yeah,
was no meeting.
Right, we
Okay.
are canceling the meeting for tomorrow. I think we already chatted about the February meeting at the last meeting.
Okay, and then on other business, is anybody interested in stepping in for Guy on the Land Acquisition Commission?
I said that I would, but I wasn't sure, you know, there was other folks that were mentioned that are current commission members, and I don't want to step on anyone's toes, but I would be.
Jay, what happens here is this is when somebody says, okay, that person that wants to take one step forward while everybody else takes one step backwards. So if you're saying
I
you're
think I
interested,
took two or
guess what?
three. I took two or
Thank you.
three.
So can I get a nomination to have Jay fill the vacancy on the Land Acquisition Committee from the Conservation Commission, right? Yep.
Correct.
Can I
Yeah.
get a motion for that?
So
Mark,
moved.
so moved.
Wow,
Second.
someone else jump once or anything.
Okay,
Oh.
so we have a motion to nominate Jay to fill the vacancy on the Land Acquisition Committee. Those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, I didn't hear Jay say no. Abstaining? Okay, so be it.
Bob,
Jay.
I have a question. Is that a normal set aside for from the
Yes.
oh, there is? Okay.
Yeah.
There's
We
two.
have we have two
There's two?
spots on it. One is dedicated
Okay.
to the chair. The other is an open position.
Okay.
Yes.
I have to say that I have to say this, I will do my best to try and fill the big guy. You know, I'll try really hard to fill guys' shoes as best I can.
Look at it this way, Jay. Most of it is in executive session, so you can't talk about it anyway. Okay, Shannon, anything on planners report?
I'll try really hard to live down the Adam
Jay,
Hoffman.
what the one? Don't do what I did. I missed the first meeting because I had no idea it started at 5 o'clock.
Uh-oh.
No, I don't have anything further for planners report this
Okay.
evening. Thank you.
And can I get a motion to approve the minutes of March 3rd, 2021 for the Conservation Commission meeting?
So moved.
A second?
Second, Mark.
Okay. Those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? Thank you, everybody, for your time on this. And fortunately, I haven't heard anybody's head hit the desk.
No, we all made it.
No. But again, I do appreciate your effort on this thing, you know, with this project. This has not been an easy one. So I do really value your comments, your opinions, and your fortitude to get through this thing. So thank you. And with that,
Thank you for your leadership.
thank you. You're welcome. So I think with that, we can adjourn.
Yay.
All right.